Have you ever heard the saying, there is always a bigger fish, or there is always someone better? This is especially true when it comes to those legendary perfect children everyone compares you to. Well, that basically sums up On's life. He is known as a jack of all trades, he can do a bit of everything, but unfortunately, he isn't the best at anything. Whenever On gets good at something, someone else better invariably shows up and puts him in his place. Because of this, he's always been obsessed with finding a way to overcome his weaknesses. One fine day, while he was working away peacefully, boom. A bolt from the blue, On was kicked out of Oliver's hero party. The leader, who was also On's childhood friend, confessed that he had tried to ignore the power gap in the group for a long time out of loyalty, but he couldn't carry the weight anymore. Keeping On in the party was only dragging the whole team down. Oliver tried to sugarcoat it to soften the blow, but the other two members, Ella and Derek, showed no mercy. They bluntly called On deadweight and a burden, claiming the team would finally thrive without him. Even though Oliver didn't say it outright, the truth hurts, and On knew exactly where he stood. So, Oliver asked On to write his resignation. Hearing this, On's heart shattered. He remembered 8 years ago when they started the team together, climbing the ranks to S-Class and even becoming the first team to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Dungeon. Yet now, Oliver was heartlessly leaving him in the lurch. Oliver explained that the role of a support mage like On was vital, but last month, his head was turned by the support skills of a girl from another S-rank team. To put it bluntly, On's support magic compared to hers was like night and day. On couldn't even argue because it was true, his support spells were just mediocre, no matter how hard he grinded. On tried to make an excuse, actually, I planned to build my character as a swordsman, but since the team lacked support, I had to switch classes. Before he could finish, Derek snapped, you switched classes because your sword skills are nowhere near Oliver's, let's be real here. Though reluctant, Oliver still had to deliver the final blow, I found a replacement, so you're off the team. On knew the other two hated him, but seeing even his best friend Oliver turn his back on him, he realized there was nothing left to hold on to. He stood up and walked straight to the door. Isla added insult to injury. What a relief, now I don't have to deal with you bossing us around anymore. Don't be too sad, though, your skills are still good enough for an A-rank adventurer. S-rank? Just forget about it. Furious, On decided to solo the Great Southern Dungeon to prove he wasn't useless. His swordsmanship might not be the absolute best, but it was enough to make mincemeat out of a pack of goblins. Combined with his self-buffs, On fought while perfectly timing his spells. He swore he would practice until his combat casting was as smooth as silk so that no one would ever dare call him useless again. After clearing the goblins, On was about to use a teleport crystal to the 7th floor when he ran into another team fleeing for their lives. He planned to mind his own business, but his sharp ears caught them mentioning they had been ambushed by orcs and had abandoned a female member. The leader was even reassuring himself, leaving her behind was the right choice, or would all be dead. When the others asked if they should go back for her, he immediately brushed it off. Hearing that made On's blood boil. Even though it wasn't his business, he loathed that kind of betrayal. He turned and cursed the leader to his face. One of the team members tried to punch On, but On slammed him to the ground, called him pathetic, and demanded to know where the girl was. Meanwhile, the poor girl was being cornered by a pack of orcs. She held up a shield, but the orcs were smashing through it like bulldozers, it was about to shatter. With tears in her eyes, she thought she was a goner. Suddenly, a gust of wind magic blew the orcs away, and On appeared like a guardian deity in front of her. While the girl was still dazed, the orcs rushed forward, and On stepped up to block them. Sophia thought On was just a swordsman, but to her surprise, she saw him cutting them down while simultaneously casting buff spells on himself. On sliced an orc clean in half, then applied a level 5 sharpness buff to his blade to finish off the rest. The orcs were as numerous as an army, and On finally understood why the other team ran, though they still deserved a beating for it. To On, these monsters were nothing but pests. He swung his sword with such grace and speed that Sophia watched in awe as every orc fell. When it was over, On checked on her, and Sophia, overwhelmed with emotion, burst into tears. On helped her out of the dungeon and was about to leave, but Sophia called out to thank him. She introduced herself as Sophia Claudel. Hearing the name Claudel and seeing the crest on her cloak, On immediately knew she came from an elite, well-connected family. Sophia insisted on inviting On to dinner to repay him. On tried to refuse, but he eventually gave in to her persistence. Sophia led him to her favorite restaurant. On noticed the restaurant's sign had the same crest as Sophia's cloak, it was clear she belonged to the Silver Rabbit of the Night Sky Clan, one of the largest guilds in the kingdom. On started to feel a bit nervous, getting involved with these big noble families usually meant trouble. While they were eating, Sophia spotted her sister, Selma, sitting at another table. Seeing her sister with a strange man, Selma immediately came over to investigate. Looking closely, she realized it was an acquaintance, Selma Claudel, the strongest S-rank leader of the Silver Rabbit and the top enchanter on the continent. She was exactly the kind of perfect child Oliver had used as a benchmark to kick On out of the team. On knew Sophia was part of the Silver Rabbit, but he hadn't realized she was Selma's biological sister. Selma glared at On with daggers in her eyes and asked, "Where exactly are you taking my 14-year-old sister late at night?" On quickly tried to explain, "You've got it all wrong, I don't have any intentions toward your sister." Unexpectedly, this made Selma even angrier. "Are you saying my sister isn't attractive enough?" Sophia had to step in. "Sister, stop. He saved my life." Upon hearing the story, Selma's attitude did a complete 180. She apologized profusely and thanked On. The three of them sat down to talk, and On mentioned they had met during a raid the previous month. Selma praised On for his excellent support work, saying he truly deserved to be in a hero team, but On confessed he had been kicked out. Selma was shocked, unable to understand why any team would waste a talent like On. She didn't miss the chance to invite him to work for her. On declined because he wanted to go solo for a while. Selma countered with a smaller offer. "Then how about joining a combat training session for rookies tomorrow? The pay is great, and you just have to teach some newbies. We'll be heading down to the 50th floor over 3 days." She mentioned that even though an A-rank adventurer was leading the group, she'd feel much safer with On there. On felt honored by Selma's praise, but since he had just been fired for being inferior to Selma, going back to being a support felt like a slap in the face. He tried to politely refuse again. However, Sophia started pleading with him, "I'll only feel safe if you're there." On softened and set a condition, "I'll only go if I can fight with my sword. I'm not going to be a decorative buff bot who just casts spells." Selma almost fainted. An enchanter who wants to use a sword? Was he crazy? But she figured that once the battle got tough, he'd naturally go back to using magic. She told On that if he agreed, he should come to the Silver Rabbit headquarters the next morning. Before heading home, On stopped by his usual weapon shop. He told the owner about being kicked out of the hero team and worried he could no longer help advertise the shop. The owner laughed it off. "Don't worry about it, kid. Whether you have the hero title or not, you're still you. You've helped me plenty, and I'm grateful. Now, go live for yourself. Help whoever you want to help." Hearing those words, On felt a warm sense of peace. The next morning, Vinsbaz, the leader of the Silver Rabbit Guild, thanked On for showing up to help. He admitted he had heard plenty of rumors about him, both good and bad, including the bitter story of On being kicked out of the hero party. On, however, avoided that topic like the plague, wanting only to focus on the technicalities of this field trip. Soma added that in 3 days, the guild would reach the 51st floor of the Southern Labyrinth. The schedule was packed, reaching the 21st floor on the first day, the 36th on the second, and so on. While the plan was being explained, the scene flashed back to Selma reporting to the boss about On leaving the hero party. She insisted it was a massive self-sabotage for the heroes. Losing On meant losing half their strength. The boss nodded in agreement, noting that a support mage like On elevated the entire team to another level. Although On's spells didn't deal massive damage, his buffing speed was 4 times faster than Selma's. Furthermore, Selma had seen On use his signature moves and his godlike ability to read maps and predict situations, providing support exactly when and where it was needed. In short, On was the perfect piece the hero party was now missing. Selma was convinced that the Silver Rabbit Guild would soon regain its peak performance thanks to him. After hearing this, Vinsbaz still found it hard to believe a talent like that was discarded like trash. However, his subordinate explained that the support role is often undervalued, working like a servant to 100 masters without anyone acknowledging their merit. Selma herself was famous and often overhyped, while true talents like On were treated like thin air. Back to the present, after hearing the plan, On began to scrutinize it. There would be 10 groups of greenhorns, newbies, and 5 escorts, including On and Selma. The rookie groups would take turns dealing with monsters, and the escort team would step in if things got dangerous. On wondered why there were only 5 escorts instead of more A-rank groups to minimize risks for the amateurs, especially since such a rushed schedule could easily lead to a disaster. Soma replied that while they wanted the rookies to reach the 51st floor, they had to taste hardship to grow. On knew this was just a scripted excuse, but whatever the real reason was, he decided to let it go. On agreed to help and accepted Boss Vinsbaz's thanks. The payment for his support role was 2 gold coins up front and another 10 upon successful completion. On's eyes lit up like car headlights. Even though the price seemed a bit surreal, it was enough to live on for a whole year. Selma assured him he deserved it, so he promised to carry the team with all his might. A few hours later, On arrived at the cave entrance where the rookies were gathering. Selma and Sophia came to greet him. On noticed Sophia was wearing the same outfit as last time, likely a uniform. He complimented her, saying it suited her well, making Sophia blush furiously as she thanked him. Seeing this, Selma got annoyed and teased On for being a smooth talker who knew how to flatter women. She took the chance to fish for information, asking if he had a girlfriend. On scratched his head, saying he was eternally single. However, since his old group had women, he had probably learned how to communicate with the opposite sex. Selma remembered that the hero party used to live under one roof. Sophia curiously asked where his friends lived now, and he said he was staying at an inn. Selma was horrified, wondering if her sister was planning to sneak out at night since she was asking for his address so specifically. Poor Sophia had to frantically explain she was just curious. Changing the subject, Selma asked why On was standing so far from the rookies. He replied that since he was a stranger, he wanted to keep his distance to keep them on their toes. Selma asked him to reassure the kids and then told Sophia to return to her group. Afterward, On went with Selma to meet the trio of escorts. Selma praised On excessively, calling him an amazing teammate. Everyone believed her implicitly because the boss's word was law. On felt pressured and told her to stop putting him on a pedestal. Finally, On took the attacker role for the escort group, which included Antum, Burnett, and Katie. He noted that the lineup seemed quite balanced. However, On suspected that if he hadn't shown up, there would have been no one for the attacker role, hinting at something suspicious. Seeing On's suspicion, Selma recalled Boss Vincent's words. The boss sympathized with her losing her trump card but reminded her that On was a support just like her. For the sake of team balance, he couldn't stay in Group 1 forever. Selma lamented that the guild had been stagnating for a year and feared they wouldn't regain their status, which is why she invited On to carry them. Even though On only agreed to come if he could fight, she hoped that in the heat of battle, he would reveal his true form as a carry support. After leaving the escort group, Selma introduced On to the rookies. She boldly announced they would descend to the 51st floor today. She understood the kids were scared because such a depth was overwhelming, but she told them not to worry because they had a heavyweight with them. She introduced On, revealing he had once reached the 94th floor, a place even the big shots of the kingdom hadn't reached. The chicks were wide-eyed and started whispering about this monstrous achievement. To top it off, she added that On was a former member of the hero party, making him a celebrity in the eyes of the interns. Immediately after the speech, On grumbled that she was putting him on an altar way too early. Selma claimed she did it to boost the kids' morale. On, however, only wanted to be a hero who helped his grandfather sell goods, not someone chasing empty titles that only caused headaches. Selma assigned On to Group 10, which consisted of the most promising seeds. With proper coordination, climbing the tower would be a piece of cake. Selma held On's hand to encourage him, but he remained skeptical. On met Group 10, which included Sophia. He thought they were short-handed, but it turned out they were a full squad. He worried that such a small group was incredibly dangerous. A boy in the group confidently explained that no one could keep up with their speed. On worried the kid would grow up to be a brat. The boy introduced himself as Logan, or Word, a future support who would surpass Selma. Next was Caroline Inglow, the tank. On noticed her outfit was quite scantily clad for a tank. She explained she followed an evasion-based build and hated wearing armor or shields because she loathed being touched by monsters. However, because she loved fighting, she chose the tank role to get as close as possible. Women's logic was hard to grasp. On pointed out that dodging is much harder than blocking, especially for an amateur like Caroline. He asked who approved this bizarre playstyle, and Logan said the whole guild opposed it, but she completely ignored them. The two started bickering, so to settle the chaos, On asked for the final member. Sophia Grotto introduced herself as a backline offensive mage. Once Sophia finished, Logan and Caroline started arguing again. On realized this trip would likely bring more trouble than luck. As soon as they entered the labyrinth, the kids went silent. Caroline snidely asked On why a member of the hero party was hanging out with a rival guild. On reminded her that he had been kicked out. She curiously asked why, but he ignored her. Changing the subject, Caroline guessed Sophia knew On from before and interrogated her. Blushing, Sophia admitted On had saved her life, and that he was strong and a former hero party member. Sophia said her sister told her to feel at ease because On was there. On wondered if Selma only praised him to reassure her sister. Suddenly, two wolves lunged for a surprise attack but were caught in a magic trap On had set beforehand. He felt he made the right call by setting traps to deal with backstabbers quickly, as time was money. By the time they reached the 20th floor, On had finished analyzing the disciples' abilities. Logan seemed like a brat but actually had talent. If he kept it up, he could easily become an A rank in the future, though his weakness was poor leadership. Caroline was indeed fast, a true evasion type, but she had two issues. She was reckless in combat and her weapons, two small daggers, lacked sufficient firepower. Sophia didn't stand out as much as the other two but was stronger than a typical rookie. She was a bit passive and hesitant, but that could be fixed with better team coordination. Since she had no fatal flaws, her future looked promising. Meanwhile, Selma's group cleared the 20th floor boss so the rookies could register their guild cards and rest. That evening, Selma asked On for his thoughts. He agreed Group 10 had potential but said their coordination was terrible. He was most worried about Caroline. Selma said the girl was much better than before. On shuddered, wondering how much of a burden she must have been in the past. The next morning, On was shocked to the core when he read a front-page news story about the hero party's new support, meaning the whole world now knew he had been replaced. He crushed the newspaper in bitterness, fearing the rookies would look down on him if they read it. Leaving the inn, he ran into Luna, an old acquaintance from the hero party. While everyone else had shunned On, Luna remained kind to him. When he was kicked out, Luna had been away on family business. If she had been there, things might have been different. Luna pleaded with On to return to the group. He asked if the others wanted that too. Luna admitted only she wanted it, but she promised to convince them. Though surprised by her sincerity, An told her it was too late, especially after that defamatory article. Luna held his hand, reminding him of their promise to conquer the Great Labyrinth together. An coldly brushed her hand away, saying that was a promise between three people, and since Oliver was the one who kicked him out, the promise was dead. An walked away in frustration, admitting to himself that he once wanted the three of them to stay together forever, but you can't undo what's been done, and there was no place for him to return to. That's the end of episode 2, remember to like and subscribe to wait for the next episode. Continuing his mental health walk, young Orhan was out here drowning in his feels, rethinking how he got kicked from the hero party for being mid. The tabloids were absolutely cooking him, posting hit pieces saying his adventurer rep was officially at negative infinite aura. Orhan knew they'd just find a replacement for him, but he was still salty. What hurt the most was that the article made his job prospects look even more cooked than his love life. It wasn't just Orhan spiraling, the newbies had already caught the tea. They were whispering in the back, and Logan was out here having a full-on midlife crisis. Wait, was this man capping about his cracked profile? When Orhan showed up to say good morning, the vibes were immaculate levels of awkward, especially after Selma's massive flex yesterday. Now that this drama leaked, it was a certified major L for everyone involved. Speak of the devil, Selma ran up breathing heavy, apologizing profusely because she was behind on the lore and hadn't seen the article. Orhan, being a total gentleman, told her it's fine, reminding her that if the leader loses their cool, the whole team is cooked. Selma felt like a local for standing Orhan without checking the map first, but Orhan took the L, saying he should have been transparent from the jump. Bottom line, Orhan promised to carry the team regardless of the drama, telling Selma to keep her chin up. Uncle Bernard jumped in to save the vibes, saying at least Orhan reaching floor 94 was no cap, and the others agreed that rolling with a high-level carry was still a vibe. Selma added that yesterday Orhan's performance was straight up out of this world, 10 out of 10 execution. Right then, the comedy trio from Group 10 came over to say hi. Orhan, keeping it 100, brought up the article immediately. Sophia and Caroline were ready to throw hands, calling the press fake news. But Logan wanted to see the receipts. Is the article for real or is it bait? Orhan nonchalantly admitted, most of it is facts, leaving the kid shook. Orhan owned up to being weak back then, saying he wasn't a hero anymore. Seeing their idol self-roasting, Sophia countered, are you trolling? You literally cleared a dozen orcs in one tap yesterday. How is that weak? Orhan humbly said that power was only enough to carry them to floor 51. Even if he wasn't a hero, he promised to protect them with absolute main character energy. Feeling the hype, Caroline and Sophia had hard eyes again, fully locked in. Only Logan felt like a clown for getting his hopes up. And so, Group 10 stepped onto the 21st floor of the Southern Great Labyrinth. Goal, floor 35. But the rule was the instructor had to stay muted, no backseating until they hit the intermediate floors. Meaning from floors 21 to 29, the noobs had to fend for themselves. Caroline and Sophia were carrying the team, while Logan was clearly lacking confidence, not making any calls. By floor 31, it was time for Coach Orhan to lock in. Sensing mobs, Orhan told everyone to prep. Goblins spawned, and Orhan told Caroline to bait them. But this girl had fast fingers, zero brain syndrome, rushing in so recklessly that Orhan had to babysit her. Next, Orhan told Sophia to block the orcs from behind while Logan provided the buffs. But before Orhan could even finish his sentence, Logan had already done it. In his head, he was like, PSH, this is standard NPC dialogue, I know the meta, I don't need a tutorial. Logan really wanted to flex on his teacher. Caroline, now buffed, was shredding goblins like it was nothing. But Sophia was shaking like a leaf in front of an orc, probably traumatized from the last time. Seeing Sophia frozen, Logan was screaming internally, is this man really gonna let her get griefed? Seeing Orhan standing still while the mob closed in, Logan concluded, it's over. This man is actually washed. We're finished. Suddenly, Orhan dropped a slow debuff on the orc and calmed Sophia down. Chill, your teammates have your back. With that mental buff, Sophia cast a fire missile so cracked it sent the orc to the lobby instantly. The team was flabbergasted because she used high-tier magic. Caroline went in for the hug, while Logan just stood there with a bruh face, completely lost in the sauce. At floor 35, they ran into a giant poison spider. Logan immediately folded, GG, it's over, we can't win this. But Orhan stayed chill, Logan, speed and defense buffs on Caroline, then mana buff Sophia. Chop chop. Caroline went back to her old ways, charging in like a suicide mission god. Logan panicked and tried to follow, but Orhan barked at him to stay put, because a mage rushing the front line is a self-delete move. Orhan told Caroline to jump on the spider's back and start hacking. She did exactly that, going ham. Orhan told her to keep kiting the spider but watch out for the poison. Logan buffed Caroline, making her dodges look like she had ultra instinct. Orhan dropped some wisdom, the tanker's mobility depends on you, Logan. Do your job and support. At the same time, Orhan told Sophia to root the spider. She used Wind Blade, slicing off 4 of its right legs. Orhan told Logan to buff Caroline's strength and skill ASAP. But Logan lagged. He hesitated for a sec because he thought they already won. Fatal mistake. The spider seized the opening, spitting silk to bind Caroline and dragging her toward its mouth. Orhan screamed for Caroline to use her knife. Logan started getting suspicious. Does this man have wall hacks? How did he predict this? Orhan told Sophia to prep a stone arrow, and told Logan he needed to rebuff Sophia because the old one was about to expire. Caroline screamed in despair that she couldn't cut the silk. Orhan did the math. Logan can only hold 3 buffs. Slots are full. Fine, I'll do it myself. Instantly, Orhan cast Sharpen on Caroline's knife. The blade turned into a literal lightsaber, and she sliced the silk in one go. Orhan shouted for Sophia to fire. The stone arrow flew, landing a headshot and deleting the spider. Caroline ran to Sophia to celebrate their near-death experience. Orhan turned to Logan and said, "We won because your buffs were cracked." The kid turned red, thanking him, but his look was different now. This man, he's actually GOAT. Orhan told the team to head back to the surface. After the raid, Selma said tomorrow was the last day and told everyone to go to sleep to save their HP. On the way back, Orhan got dragged out for drinks by Bernard and Anthem. Orhan was surprised. "Wait, you guys don't hate me?" Bernard laughed. "Hate? Nah, let's just grab a drink. We've been so busy hitting KPIs we haven't had time to gossip." Orhan saw this as a chance to vent, so he was down. Meanwhile, in the carriage taking the kids back to the city, Logan brought up the time Orhan saved Sophia. Sophia talked about being saved in the new dungeon 3 days ago. Logan was fishing for details. What spells did he use? How's his combat? Sophia remembered. He used wind to blow everything away, and he made his sword glow. Logan did the math. That's Sharpen, a weapon buff, not a player buff. Caroline realized, facts, he used that on my knife today. It was sharp enough to cut through anything. Logan dropped the conclusion, so he knows how to use melee weapons. Sophia added, he switched to attacker after getting kicked from the hero party. Logan was shook for the second time. Orhan was shot-calling like a textbook enchanter, but now it turns out he's a fighter? Logan realized he was mad at Orhan because he thought the guy was a fraud. But thinking back to the orc fight, Orhan used a slow spell, a high-skill move even Selma rarely uses, like it was nothing, then the spider fight. Logan realized he finally understood what a meta-team comp felt like. The tanker baits, the attacker and support get space to cook. Orhan's buff timing was frame perfect, and he even predicted the silk attack. Conclusion, Orhan reads the situation like a book, his shot calling is 0 delay. He's a genius enchanter. But why switch to melee? Logan felt like Orhan was a universal genius, and he didn't want to get left behind. Logan vowed to grind until he became the best enchanter. Caroline saw her friend looking all main character edgy and teased him, but Logan just said, I'm just getting hyped for tomorrow. At the Silver Rabbit Tavern, Bernard and Anthem insisted on paying. Bernard guessed, back in the hero party, you were probably out here living your best life, right? Orhan laughed painfully, nah, I was basically a glorified secretary. I barely had time to breathe, let alone play. Hearing that, the other instructors felt the secondhand cringe regarding the tabloid drama. Orhan thanked them for understanding the corporate struggle. Anthem asked, wait, were you actually the enchanter for that group? When we met, you said you were an attacker, Orhan explained. I switched to swordsman after I left. But honestly, I was already doing that job back then too. Truth is, I've always wanted to be a swordsman because of my grandpa. Orhan's grandpa was a legendary adventurer who once one-shot a giant monster to save the village. Orhan thought it was peak and wanted to be just as cool, asked why he became an enchanter. Orhan vented, the hero party kept going deeper, mobs got stronger, and progress slowed down. They needed an enchanter. That role was meta at the time, and since I'm a jack of all trades, they forced me into that role. Anthem felt for him but gave props. Well, thanks to you, they hit floor 94. It was the right call. But Orhan got serious. Actually, no. Even if I switched roles, the team should have slowed down to grind levels for safety. When they asked what he meant, Orhan dodged the question, saying he was just being too critical. But deep down, Orhan thought, to be real, that hero party isn't clearing floor 94 anytime soon because that hero guy is gatekeeping his own skills. Bernard changed the subject to kill the tension. So, what's your ideal swordsman? Orhan replied, a jack of all trades who can vibe with any rhythm. Like, someone who can solo from floor 1 to the top. That's who I want to be. Meanwhile, at the women's bath, Caroline was in her feels. Tomorrow's the last day. I'm gonna miss Orhan sensei. Sophia was also down bad, admitting she wanted Orhan to just join the Silver Rabbit Guild. Caroline pushed her, why don't you ask him? Sophia was insecure, he'd probably say no. But Caroline hyped her up, you never know, he might say yes, just like your sister Selma back in the day. Sophia said Orhan was built different than her sister, but after thinking it over, she realized if she didn't shoot her shot, she'd lose the chance. She decided to go big or go home. The next day, at the Labyrinth Gate, the hero party showed up and caused a total scene. While that guy Oliver was out here aura maxing and acting flashy, Luna looked like she was in a bad mood and totally uncomfortable. That's the end of episode 3. Smash that subscribe button and hit the bell for the next update. Bye bye. Next morning, my boy Orn dragged his soul back to the dungeon entrance to wrap up the final phase, only to be hit with an immediate welcome back committee from the kids. Seeing the vision, Caroline decided to play Wingman of the Year, carving out some space for Sophia to have a low-key heart-to-heart with Orn. She was dropping hints like crazy about how slay a post-mission reward would be, giving Sophia the side-eye to finally ask Orn to join the guild officially. But just as Sophia was about to secure the bag and ask him, big sis Selma jumped in like a total gatekeeper, pulling Orn away and leaving Sophia to just stand there in silence. While Orn was headed toward Selma, his ears caught some tea being spilled by the students nearby. The rumor mill was working overtime. Word on the street was the hero party was trying to do the most today, going full main character energy by diving straight into the deepest part of the dungeon, starting from floor 92. Orn was straight up gagged. He couldn't believe they were actually clout chasing this hard. Like, they literally replaced a member 2 days ago, the synergy is non-existent, and they're already trying to rank up like that? Orn started to low-key panic for his old squad, but then he remembered, wait, why am I stressing? Not my circus, not my monkeys. Meanwhile, the hero party just touched down on floor 92 with their new addition, Philly Carpenter. These clowns didn't even bother with a vibe check or practice run, but they had receipts to back up their overconfidence. Philly's resume was stacked. During her intro 2 days ago, she flexed about clearing floor 100 of the western dungeon. So, following their room temperature IQ logic, they assumed the southern dungeon would be a literal walk in the park. The messy duo, Annalie and Dereric, were convinced Philly's support spells would outshine Orn's mid-skills any day, and started dragging Orn's name through the mud for fun. They're especially salty because Orn used to be the budget police, banning their expensive parties even though the treasury was literally overflowing. Listening to them talk, Philly started seeing major red flags because, honestly, without Orn, these two would probably be down bad and broke. Sensing the bad vibes, the flopped hero Oliver jumped in to stop the trash talk, saying today should be about celebrating Philly. Right then, Luna burst in after hearing the latest leak. Orn joined the Silver Rabbits. She was absolutely shook to find out the team had kicked Orn and replaced him without even checking the group chat. Luna was like, wait, why is Orn out here running with the elites? Dereric and Annalie were shooked, unable to process how a guy they labeled trash managed to get into a top-tier guild in just a few days. But whatever, Orn's cancelled in their books now. At first, Luna thought Orn quit because he was tired of carrying the team, but then Dereric had the audacity to flex that they were the ones who kicked him. Luna was officially done. She had to remind them that Orn was the literal backbone of the squad, and without him, they wouldn't have even made it past the tutorial, let alone this far. But of course, these gatekeepers were strictly on that copium. Dereric really had the audacity to bark back, saying no matter how much Luna tried to glaze Orn in his eyes, the guy was just a bottom-tier enchanter and a certified loser. Plus, he's already gone, so why keep yapping? Luna was pressed, but she knew that screaming into the void wouldn't bring Orn back. She had to just grit her teeth and accept the fact that their hard carry was officially out of the picture. Seeing Luna go quiet, the squad really thought they ate. Then Oliver decided to pull a double kill on the stupidity meter by announcing they'd test their synergy with Philly right here on floor 92. And if the vibes were right, they'd push to floor 94 just to chase a new record. Luna immediately vetoed that because she actually values her life. She told Oliver that if he wanted to test a new character, he should go down to floor 30 where it's safe. But the whole group looked at her like she was speaking Simlish. Honestly, with this level of IQ, it's a miracle they haven't been natural selected yet. They had zero awareness of how dangerous it is to take a newbie to train on a floor where they almost got deleted last time. Dereric and Annalie admitted last time was a close call, but they blamed Orn for nerfing the team. Now that they have Philly, who is supposedly 1000x better, they think they're invincible. Luna was still fighting for her life in the argument because the Black Dragon spawns here, but Oliver pulled a total dictator move, saying it's his way or the highway. Luna should have left the group chat right then and there, but since she was still attached to this trash fire of a party, she just went along with it. And surprise, surprise, everything went exactly as downhill as Luna predicted. Right now, the team is in a mid-off with a giant mammoth, a mob they usually clear with their eyes closed. But today? Oliver's sword was doing 0 DPS, Dereric couldn't tank a single hit, and Annalie's fire spells looked like budget 4th of July sparklers. Everyone was shook, thinking that with Philly's buffs, their damage would be cracked. But reality check, it was the opposite. Philly was struggling just to keep basic buffs active, let alone analyzing the field and shot calling like Orn did. It was every man for himself, everyone making their own moves. And based on their track record, their decision-making was 0-4-3. Finally, Oliver's last two brain cells started rubbing together. He realized the heartbreaking truth that the whole team was actually weak as hell, though he still couldn't math out why. The whole time, Luna just stood on the sidelines watching them clown around. She was about to explain the situation when a terrifying roar cut her off. The final boss Luna was worried about just entered the chat, the Black Dragon. The dragon landed, one-shotting the mammoth like it was nothing, and the shockwave sent everyone faceplanting. Luna screamed at them to run for their lives, but Derek and Annalie were still delulu, thinking they actually had a chance. Oliver doubled down, thinking since they beat a dragon last time, they could do it again. But these idiots completely forgot they only won last time because Ornhard carried their entire existence. Derek charged in trying to tank a fireball, but the second it touched him, he was knocked out cold, looking like a piece of burnt toast. Luna rushed in to heal his sorry self. Meanwhile, Philly was just lagging in real life, standing there frozen with 1,000 regrets about joining this trash fire of a party. Annalie decided to throw a fire spear at the dragon, and the only thing she achieved was making it mad. The dragon switched targets to Annalie and breathed a light fireball her way. Even hiding behind a rock didn't save her, she got blown away like a ragdoll. Witnessing his teammates getting absolutely folded, Oliver started panicking and went full NPC mode. Luna had to scream in his face that if they didn't leave now, they'd all be cooked literally. Oliver finally snapped out of it, but the situation was already GG. The dragon was charging up its next ultimate, while the two deadweights, Derek and Annalie, were still unconscious. Luna told Oliver to stall for time so she could heal the two burdens. Oliver turned and yelled at Philly, snapping her out of her brain rot and ordering her to dump every buff she had on him. Philly followed orders like a bot. Armed with the buffs, Oliver felt that main character energy and prepped his ultimate to save the day. But spoiler alert, reality hit hard. Oliver's slash touched the dragon's fireball and got extinguished instantly, sending him flying. He fell into total despair, thinking if his strongest move did 0 damage, they were officially cooked. Luna looked at her leader and was just tired. Out of options, she suggested using the emergency teleport gate. It's a high-risk, high-reward item that lets you skip floors but might drop you straight into a boss room. Philly was shook because they were basically trading one death trap for another, but staying meant becoming barbecue, so she closed her eyes and sent it. Oliver activated the gate, grabbing Derek and Annalie to jump. But right then, the dragon blocked their path with a wall of fire, charged forward, and accidentally clipped through the portal itself. The dragon vanished, and Derek, who just woke up, sighed in relief. But Luna let out a scream of pure despair because this was the worst-case scenario. Oliver finally realized the disaster. The dragon had been teleported to a random boss room. This meant some random newbies were about to meet the Black Dragon face-to-face and probably log out of life permanently. Luna ordered the squad to get back to the guild ASAP to sound the alarm and trigger a forced mass recall for all adventurers. It was the only way to save lives. Oliver was low-key scared because he knew he was gonna get cancelled by the guild, but lives were on the line. However, Luna reminded them that Derek and Annalie were still one tap away from death and needed healing. Then, Luna dropped a truth bomb that left Oliver shook. After the evacuation, they had to go back and fight that dragon, and they had to swap Philly for Orn. Oliver couldn't believe his ears. Luna didn't want to drag Orn back to clean up their mess either, but there was no other way. She finally started explaining that the reason they were all weak as hell was specifically because they lacked Orn's carry. Oliver immediately tried to exit the chat, arguing that his divine slash didn't even leave a scratch on the dragon. Luna hit him with a cold reality check. It was purely a skill issue caused by his own laziness. See, buff strength depends on the caster, but how long it lasts depends on the receiver's magic resistance. Since Oliver's resistance is cracked, Philly's buffs only lasted like 60 seconds. Back in the day, Orn was a pro gamer who timed everything perfectly, refreshing buffs constantly so Oliver never felt the nerf. Oliver tried to cope, saying Philly has higher base stats so she should be better. Luna admitted Orn wasn't born with god-tier talent, but because of that, he literally coded his own original spells to compensate. The whole squad was absolutely gagged. A mage creating their own original spells is main character behavior and extremely rare. Orn's base spells were low-key weak, but his custom algorithms boosted their power by 50x. Philly almost passed out hearing that, since even her master Selma can only buff up to 10x. And there's more, Divine Slash is a charge-up move. If Oliver had actually put in the work to hold the charge longer, he would have done some real DPS. But he got used to being carried by Orn's buffs, becoming a lazy casual who wanted max rewards for 0 effort. Annalie was the same. She got so used to Orn's premium buffs that she only spammed mid-tier spells because they were easier to cast. Then came the final fatality. Orn's spells could even buff equipment. This meant the team's god-tier offense and defense all this time was just Orn enchanting their gear, and these clowns had no idea. They actually thought they were just built different. At this point, the few brain cells they had left finally started to reboot, realizing Orn was their literal lifeline. But it only lasted 5 seconds before Oliver's massive ego took over again, drowning out any sign of intelligence. He started gaslighting himself, claiming their last dragon win had absolutely zero to do with Ornn. Never mind the flashback clearly showing Ornn in the back, carrying the whole team on his back until his spine nearly snapped. Honestly, he's a lost cause. End of episode 4. Get your popcorn ready to watch them down bad and begging their ex-teammate for help in the next one. Back to Team Orhan. Today is the final day to secure the bag for this internship. The plan sounds like a total breeze. Start from floor 36, speedrun straight to floor 50, and then hit the teleport button for a safe exit. It sounds too easy, but for some reason, Orhan's gut is doing backflips. He's getting a major bad vibe about this. Sure, the mobs around here are too much for these newbies to solo, but with a high-tier carry like him on the squad, it should still be a total walk in the park. But that creepypasta feeling from the dungeon today is just haunting Orhan, and he can't put his finger on why. While he was busy being deep and trying to figure out the source, the kids started shouting his name because they were extra hyped. Giving up on his overthinking, Orhan just shrugged his worries off. Little Caroline was still on her main character energy, yapping at Orhan for some secret farm bot hacks because she low-key just wants to delete every mob in sight. Orhan immediately hit her with a reality check, telling her that as a newbie, she needs to sit down and be humble. He reminded her that a guardian's job is to babysit the team, not to be a Leroy Jenkins and feed the mobs. But Caroline pouted, saying that playing safe is zero fun. Logan jumped into the chat, telling Caroline she better appreciate Orhan's advice, because back in the day, the legend Albert used to teach the exact same thing. The name Albert Sensible, the cracked ace of the Silver Rabbits, gave Orhan an immediate jump scare. This guy logged out of the server last year while raiding the Black Dragon on floor 92 just to save his squad. Turns out, Caroline knows the tea on this case. Albert died because he was doing the Guardian's job, so she doesn't want her own team to repeat history. That's why she's always try-harding and running ahead of everyone. Orhan could see right through her trauma, but he was hired as an adventurer, not a certified therapist, so he decided to just act blind and move on. Right then, Sophia and Logan also started glazing him, asking for some pro tips to level up their game. A bit later, the whole squad dipped into the dungeon. During a break time, the baddie Selma struck up a convo, teasing Orhan about how the kids are basically standing him now. Orhan admitted that after that cancel culture article dropped, he thought the kids would ghost him, but they've actually been wholesome and nice. Selma brought back the Albert topic, getting emotional about the massive L the Silver Rabbits took. After that incident, Orhan and his flop old hero party managed to delete the Black Dragon, but it was a close call. So Orhan knows for a fact that Albert didn't die because he was a noob, he just had zero luck. Selma started her sob story about how impossible it is to fill Albert's shoes, low-key trying to recruit Orhan to the guild. But Orhan was stone cold with the rejection, dropping a total truth bomb. One squad doesn't need two enchanters, sis. Selma got the memo but still tried to cope, thinking to herself that if Orhan just switched to a swordsman build, he'd still be a high-tier asset for the team. After that, the mission officially hit the start button. Team Orhan got bumped to Group 10, essentially playing rearguard at the very back of the line. Being at the back was supposedly because they were seen as the potential GOATs. Sophia was low-key shook because being last meant no one was covering their 6. Orhan calmed her down, saying this was the big brain way to learn. This dungeon is high-key confusing, and if they ever get lost, they need to know how to find their way back. Logan nodded along like a simp for the plan, but Caroline was still not a fan of the getting lost vibes. Orhan had to give another masterclass on the importance of map awareness and gathering intel so they don't get jumped out of nowhere. Since they were on the topic, Caroline begged Orhan to leak some info because rumors say he's gone deeper into the dungeon than everyone else combined. Orhan decided to feed the fans, revealing that the low floors officially start at floor 76 with an ice map. As for the deep floors, that's floor 91 and up. But before he could finish flexing his knowledge, the kids started spamming him with questions like a chaotic press conference, leaving him speechless. Meanwhile, back on the surface, Luna and the flop hero party sprinted to the guild hall, demanding to see the guild leader ASAP to drop some world-ending news. The receptionist, Ella Laner, was like, "The boss is in a meeting, wait your turn, sweetie." Luna screamed in pure despair, "There's no time for this, girl. We need to hit the forced recall button and pull everyone out of that dungeon right now." Back underground, Team Orhan started noticing some major red flags. They'd been walking forever without seeing a single mob, even though this massive room is usually crawling with enemies. Logan asked Orhan what was up, but even he was clueless, having never seen this glitch before. It felt like the mobs were scared of something terrifying and had completely ghosted the area. Caroline was getting itchy feet, annoyed that there was nothing to punch. Suddenly, seeing a lone goblin, she sent it and charged in like a literal bullet. Orhan screamed a warning to stop because that mob could one-tap her into the afterlife, but Caroline had that main character deafness and totally ignored him. Having no choice, Orhan had to rush in for the save, hitting the goblin with a massive debuff to buy time for her to get the final blow. Once it was over, Caroline was flexing her kill like a pro. The whole team huddled up and dragged her for being such a reckless newbie. At first, she tried to gaslight them back, But once they pointed out that without Orhan she'd be game over, and that Sophia and Logan would have had to risk their lives to save her, endangering the whole squad, Caroline finally realized she was trippin' and apologized like crazy. Seeing the kid take the L gracefully, Orhan didn't hold a grudge. In fact, seeing how Caroline was obsessed with combat despite being a guardian, Orhan decided to drop some lore and teach her a special skill called active defense. Since Caroline was so hyped, Orhan started the lecture. Listen up, active defense is basically about knowing how to flex and pull aggro so the mobs stay busy with you while your teammates prep their toys. Every monster has a wind up before dropping a heavy attack. If you time it right and parry that, you can basically stun lock them for a hot minute. But if you want to pull this off, you have to sweat and study their attack patterns to hit them right before they pop their skill. Caroline's eyes lit up like high beams, calling the move fire for deleting monsters. Orhan immediately hit her with another reality check. Remember this, your goal isn't to get a solo kill, it's to stall for the squad. Got it? Caroline started nodding like a glitchy bobblehead. Meanwhile, back on the surface, the guild leader was standing there clueless, wondering why the hero party dragged him out for an emergency meeting. Luna got straight to the point, boss. You need to hit the forced recall button and pull everyone out of the dungeon right now. The guild leader started gatekeeping the resources, whining about how a large-scale spell costs a bra amount of mana and should only be used for real emergencies. Luna dropped the bomb. The black dragon clipped through my glitched portal. Right now, it's basically backpacking through a random floor down there. If we don't move fast, it's gonna be a mass deletion event. Even though the situation was high-key intense, the guild leader still wanted to have a discussion and follow official procedures. Talk about being a boring bureaucrat. Back underground, Logan asked to learn some curse spells. Orhan shut that down instantly, telling him the vibe was off on that idea. This stuff is hard mode for real. Its effectiveness depends on the target's magic resistance. To be cracked at it, you'd have to memorize the stats of every single mob in this dungeon. Plus, on the deeper floors, mobs have god-tier magic resistance, making this your main skill would literally be throwing the game. Instead, Orhan taught them a pro strat tip. He pointed at two wolves charging them, but instead of attacking, he just stood there AFK. A few seconds later, the two wolves walked right into a trap he'd pre-ordered, and they were down bad on the floor. Everyone's jaws dropped because they'd never seen anything like it. Orhan explained just a small life hack, but it's a total lifesaver. An enchanter has to know how to control the battlefield and set traps so the team doesn't get jumped. Logan nodded along, finally soaking up the wisdom. Then it was Sophia's turn. Orhan advised her to learn parallel casting. She uses high-tier spells, but her loading time is way too long. Learning this means while she's buffering the first spell, she's already pre-loading the second one, cutting down the dead time. It's a bit of a sweaty skill, but she can pull it off with practice. Orhan was about to tell her to ask Big Sis Selma for lessons after the mission. But Sophia pulled out the pretty privilege card, pouting and saying, "I want teacher Orhan to teach me." Seeing a certified baddie begging, Orhan wanted to say no, but his heart lost the battle against logic, so he just shrugged and agreed to some private tutoring after hours. Finally, the teleportation spell finished charging. The guild leader prepped to hit the button and tasked the hero party with heading back into the dungeon to delete the black dragon. The whole squad's faces turned ghostly pale hearing that, knowing their mid-skills weren't enough to handle that raid boss. Amelie tried to yap her way out of it, claiming they needed recovery time, but Luna cut her off, locking in the mission to go kill the dragon immediately. However, she made one special request. Down in the dungeon, Orhan's group had crawled their way to the floor boss room. This boss was a bit too high level for the newbies, so the bodyguards stepped up. Orhan rushed to the front line, moving smooth as butter, kiting the troll so everyone else could spam their skills. Thanks to Orhan's god-tier crowd control, the troll was deleted in minutes. Everything was flowing perfectly. However, over with the hero party, the vibes were down bad. They were on their way back to the dungeon. Luna explained why she requested the guild leader to prioritize recalling people from floors 40 to 50 first. The reason was simple: Orhan was there. Luna knew for a fact that without their old support carrying the team on his back, they had zero chance against the Black Dragon. They needed to re-recruit Orhan ASAP. At floor 50, Team Orhan just finished cooking a crab, officially completing the quest. Orhan let out a sigh of relief, thinking he was finally going home to sleep. But plot twist, life had other plans. Just as Orhan was about to relax, crack crack, the space above them literally shattered. The legendary Black Dragon spawned in out of nowhere like a final boss. Everyone was so shook they almost logged out of life. And that's a wrap. Subscribe to the channel now to see how Orhan hard carries the squad in the next episode. Bye bye. Selma and the proctors all froze for 5 seconds, faces turning ghostly white because they knew exactly how cracked this Black Dragon's power level was. Even Orhan was in a total RIP state of mind, knowing that with their current mid-stats, the squad stood zero chance in a fair fight. The only W condition left was to juke the boss or sprint straight to the teleport crystal. But that's easier said than done, especially when the 500-ish people around were literally shaking in their boots, too paralyzed with fear to even make a move. Usually, mobs prioritize farming the biggest crowds first, so the team was basically food waiting to be served. Orhan knew he could easily sulk away and save his own skin, but he wasn't about to pull a main character exit and leave the innocent kids behind. So, he decided to go big or go home just to show the world his main character energy. He was going fully Yasuo solo mode, betting his life against the Black Dragon. He roared at the proctors, ordering them to do whatever it takes to babysit the kids and keep them alive. Hearing the command, the group finally locked in, huddling up in defense mode while Orhan rushed in to feed the aggro. Just as Orhan predicted, the dragon spat a super-sized fireball at the group. Even with the shields up, everyone knew those budget barriers were way too low tier to tank a dragon's breath. However, at the exact moment of impact, Orhan clutched a shield reinforcement skill in a split second, saving the team from a total wipe. This lightning-fast pro-gamer move was so subtle only a high IQ observer like Selma realized Orhan just dropped some support buffs. But Orhan was currently busy as hell looking for an angle to poke the dragon. He yeeted a dagger at its eye. The dragon closed its eye just in time to block, but that was exactly according to Orhan's big brain script. While it was blinded for a second, he leaped into the air, aiming straight for its neck and unleashing a slash so heavy it caused a literal explosion. The team below was shook, jaws on the floor, unable to believe Orhan could pull off such a high DPS one-hit move. But plot twist, reality hit hard. That strike wasn't enough to delete the boss. In fact, the dragon didn't even lose a single HP, leaving everyone panicked and stressing for their lives. But Orhan immediately hit them with a "stay calm, I have a plan." He equipped his designer necklace and charged back into the combat. The dragon launched a fireball, but Orhan popped his Uno reverse mirror skill, reflecting the damage right back at it. Logan was mind blown because he'd never seen a reflect spell that delusional and broken before. It's simple, really it's because this is an Orhan original masterpiece. Orhan was low-key hyped thinking the dragon's own fire would nerf it, but the boss was still healthy as hell, acting like nothing even happened. Pressed, he decided to go for broke. He activated a self-buff to boost his stats, doubling the power of all his base attribute skills. Selma was still stressing out because even though Orhan is cracked, a 2x buff is still mid compared to a dragon. However, Orhan wasn't stopping at 2x. He sent it and stacked the buff 4 more times, boosting his power by a massive 32x. Selma's brain literally lagged out. She couldn't believe her eyes because usually, stacking the same spell just resets the timer. It doesn't game break and stack the effects like this. Big Sis had no idea how Orhan was pulling this modded move off, but her gut told her this wasn't even his final hidden card. With that 32x buff, Orhan was moving like the Flash, leaving the team fighting for their lives just trying to track him with their eyes. But he couldn't maintain this god mode for long because carrying 30 spells simultaneously was destroying his body. He wanted to end game as fast as possible, so he dove straight back at the dragon. Mid-air, the dragon swung its tail, trying to delete Orhan. But he clutched it by creating a glitched magical platform under his feet to dodge the hit. This platform isn't even a spell, it's Orhan's hidden passive magical convergence, which allows him to compress magic into a single point and materialize it. He even used raw magic to dash through the air like he had a jet engine attached. This skill is meta for combat, but it's not an exclusive drop. Oliver has the exact same skill, but instead of using it for movement like Orhan, he uses it to buff his physical damage for heavy hits. Orhan stacked a bunch of enchantments on his sword and rushed in for the next slash. This time the damage actually connected, and the dragon finally felt the sting. But the side effects of sweat stacking those buffs were starting to turn Orhan's body into literal mashed potatoes. Selma saw Orhan struggling, but the other proctors were too noob and couldn't even keep up with the game speed. If she tried to jump in, she'd probably just end up feeding the boss. For the first time in years, Selma felt her blood pressure drop. She was shaking in her boots even though she tried to keep it low-key. But she stayed locked in to protect the students so Orhan could focus on the combat. Flashback time back when Orhan was just a little bro, he spent his days hanging out with Luna and Oliver in the village. Life was as wholesome as a cartoon. But everything changed when the griefers attacked. One day, Orhan and Oliver came back from a training session only to find the whole village burned to a crisp, with everyone they knew logging out of the server permanently. The two were down bad and depressed, hating themselves for being too weak to save anyone. After burying their people, the two made a blood oath to grind until they were cracked so this tragedy would never happen again. That's the promise Orhan spent his entire youth trying to manifest. No way he's letting some dragon stop him from protecting his besties. Purple mist started surrounding the dragon, a sign it was about to drop its ultimate. Selma wondered what Orhan's move was. He guessed the mist worked like his magical convergence principle. Basically, the dragon was buffering its mana for a massive blast. The dragon used that energy to spawn weapons that went yeeting everywhere. But Orhan remembered from the last raid that it used way more weapons than this. It was obvious the dragon was underestimating him. He decided to exploit that big ego. When the dragon started spamming projectiles, Orhan started weaving left and right to dodge, then tossed a fireball as bait to distract it, looking for a gap to close in for the final hit. But plot twist, the dragon wasn't playing. After charging up even more energy, its scales became as hard as reinforced concrete. On top of that, Orhan didn't even have a second to catch his breath because the dragon was spamming magic skills like it had infinite mana hacks. Panicked, he quickly built a budget stone wall for cover. But that wall was more useless than he thought, because the dragon pulled a pro billiards move, curving a spear right around the wall for a flank attack, leaving Orhan's side completely exposed. Bless up, because Orhan is a safety-first king. He had already precast a reflect shield just in case some extra mess like this happened, otherwise, he would have logged out of the Earth server a long time ago. The audience down there was holding their breath for the drama, praying Orhan would carry the win. But Big Sis Selma was just shaking her head, seeing how tough this match was, since Orhan had been mostly kiting and running around without landing a single crit hit yet. Soloing this boss was way harder than Orhan expected. Even though he hated his old party for backstabbing him like snakes, he couldn't deny they were actually kinda cracked at their jobs. Now, without them, Orhan has to DIY everything, carrying the workload of 4 people on his back. He knows it's impossible mode, but taking an L isn't in his dictionary, so he's gotta flex and make something happen no matter what. Orhan started showboating, using the active defense moves he taught Caroline to mess up the dragon's rhythm, while baiting it away so no stray bullets would hit the kids. Once he successfully kited the dragon far enough, Orhan spammed fireballs like a literal rainstorm. The dragon was unfazed, but that was all part of Orhan's big brain play. Turns out, those fireballs were modded into traps that could leech ambient mana to auto-trigger repeatedly with even higher DPS. Basically, the dragon was getting spawn-killed by explosions until Orhan decided he was done. The dragon's HP was tanking, but it was still too tanky to go down, even breaking through Orhan's magic circles. Luckily, he still had a few hidden cards up his sleeve. Remembering Oliver's finisher from back in the day, Orhan decided to copy-paste that move, but the Orhan original version. When the dragon breathed fire, Orhan unleashed his divine slash. To make sure it didn't get blocked, he buffed a collision effect right when the sword hit the flames, letting the slash pierce through the fire and fly straight into the dragon's face with massive force. Boom! A mega-sized explosion. A piece of the dragon's body fell to the ground, and everyone thought Orhan had finally cleared the game. But nope, the dragon was still alive and kicking. Turns out it played a sacrificial pawn move, trading its tail to tank Orhan's slash. Orhan was shook because he didn't account for that play, but looking back, it makes sense for a high-tier boss to have that kind of IQ. The salty dragon started spamming energy projectiles at Orhan like crazy, making him run for his life just to dodge the bullet hell. While he was running, he hit a major fail. The buff timer ran out. Orhan's power level tanked back to basic human stats. Selma saw this and tried to jump in with some support buffs. But Orhan shut her down immediately. Get back, sis. Your buffs are mid and won't do anything. Just focus on babysitting the kids. I'm soloing this oversized lizard. Right after that, he self-buffed with quintuple reinforcement, the modded buff part 2, and launched a lightning strike at the dragon. The hit was so heavy it literally swatted the dragon out of the sky and sent it crashing to the ground. Everyone was lurking like, is it dead yet? Is it dead yet? Still nope. This dragon is low-key unkillable. Orhan started to panic because he was running out of moves to flex. His sword, after carrying way too much stress, shattered like a dry cracker. But seeing the dragon was also on 1 HP, Orhan knew he just needed one more final blow. He yeeted the broken sword away and decided to pull out the final boss weapon. Orhan cast destruction magic, summoning a blacked-out greatsword that looked absolutely fire, a weapon nobody had ever seen him use before. This destruction spell compresses high-intensity magic into the shape of a blade, with power scaling to special grade levels. Orhan charged in for the final showdown. Instead of just brainlessly rushing in, he pulled a ping-pong move, bouncing back and forth between dozens of reflection walls scattered across the field to build up illegal amounts of speed. Finally, he dove from the heavens, dropping a fatal crit right on the dragon's head, officially sending it to the afterlife. And that's the end of episode 6. Subscribe and hit that bell icon to see what happens next, besties. Bye-bye. Back on the surface, Orhan's old squad was sprinting toward the dungeon like their lives depended on it, but when they arrived, they were shook by the sight of the black dragon's massive face right in front of them. At first, everyone was shaking in their boots, but Luna quickly checked the receipts. The dragon was dead as a doornail, probably having hitched a ride on the teleport gate with the adventurers. And standing next to the corpse, she spotted Orhan leaning on his sword, struggling to catch his breath and using every last bit of energy just to stay upright. Seeing her ex-teammate looking completely wrecked and bruised, Luna was about to jump in and spam some heals immediately, but Orhan shut it down, telling her to just handle the cleanup instead, because he just wanted to go home and hibernate. That's when it clicked for Luna. Everyone in the group was perfectly fine except for Orhan, who was covered in battle scars. The math was matting. Did he really solo the entire dragon? It sounded like total delusional logic, but it was right there. Speaking of delusional, Derek started throwing a total temper tantrum and refused to believe it. Even with the receipt staring him in the face, his brain was in total denial mode, literally pulling the "I don't hear you, I don't see you" move. Orhan knew explaining anything to this room temperature IQ guy was just a waste of calories, so he ghosted Derek's provocations and just started vibe walking back home. This main character attitude made Derek absolutely losing it with saltiness. Finding the behavior cringe, Luna had to scream at Derek's face, telling him to stop being a clown. She spilled the tea straight without Orhan carrying the team. "You're literally trash, so stop the cap and accept reality, sweetie." Hearing those true damage words, Derek went feral and tried to catch hands with Luna, but she wasn't scared. She walked the walk and frozen him instantly without even lifting a finger. At this point, if she really wanted to, she could have ended his whole career and buried him. Seeing things get toxic, Oliver yelled at them to stop. Even though it was clear as day that Orhan wasn't weak, Oliver's ego was bigger than the dungeon itself. He refused to admit he was trash and kept blaming the circumstances. After everyone went home, the kids were tasked with writing a report on the trip. Sophia was hyped to write a whole fan fiction praising Orhan to the moon. While she was locked in, Selma dragged herself home looking like a sleep-deprived zombie and face planted onto the bed without saying a word. Feeling bad for her friend, Sophia invited Selma for a relaxing bath together. A sweet deal like that. Selma secured the bag immediately. While soaking in the tub, Selma asked Sophia what she thought of Orhan's performance today. Sophia was basically speechless because Orhan was out of this world strong, so cracked she couldn't even process it. However, the kid claimed she still tracked every single move he made, saying it wasn't even that hard to follow him. Selma was stunned into silence, jumping up to grill Sophia on what she actually saw. Sophia analyzed it like a pro. Even though Orhan's power and movement were god tier and unmatched, he was actually just using basic skills. We're talking active defense, magic, reinforcement. The insane part was that he was solo carrying all those roles simultaneously and keeping it smooth as butter. Selma felt low-key depressed hearing that, feeling like a total noob who couldn't even stand in the same league as Orhan's power. But Sophia quickly hit her with some comfort, saying Selma is still her forever idol and telling her not to stress about it. Speaking of being overworked, the next morning Orhan felt like he'd been hit by a truck because he hard carried against the dragon yesterday, but he felt lucky as hell dumping mana like a waterfall and only ending up with some sore muscles as a massive W. Looking out the window, he was surprised to see Selma speeding over like her life depended on it. A few minutes later, they met at a cafe. Selma was apologizing left and right for being extra, but she was panicked and just wanted to check if he was still alive. Orhan said he was chilling and not to worry, but he was low-key touched that she traveled all that way just for a vibe check. Selma stood up and gave a serious thank you to Orhan, because thanks to his carry, everyone kept their lives and nobody had to respawn in the afterlife. She asked if Orhan was free to stop by her guild, because the big boss wanted a meeting. Having nothing better to do, Orhan locked in and agreed immediately. At the Silver Rabbits HQ, the CEO got straight to the point. Join the squad, lil bro. The perks were cracked. He'd be the main DPS for Team 1, the strongest squad in the guild, and get promoted to lieutenant right away. Orhan's jaw dropped because someone his age getting that high of a rank is super rare, but the boss insisted his skill ceiling was more than enough to carry. Orhan was flexing a bit. A normal person would have signed the contract instantly, but he asked for some time to think just to keep it classy. The CEO was totally cool with it, telling him to take as much time as he needed to process. On the way, Orhan was mateing out the Silver Rabbits deal. It was a sweet deal for sure, but he was still traumatized by his past, low-key scared he'd run into more toxic teammates and deadweights like his old squad. But karma is a mirror. He arrived at the spot only to find his entire old team sitting right there like a bunch of NPCs. The meeting started, and the guild leader asked point-blank, "Rumor has it you solo killed the Black Dragon." Orhan verified it with 0 cap. But before he could even look cool, Derek and Annalie started eye-rolling and mocking him. "Oh please, you just stole. We got it to 1 HP and you just jumped in for the final blow, so you should be thanking us." These guys are delusional on a level with fanboys thinking Gojo is coming back. It's actually scary. Orhan flamed Derek right to his face. "You're clueless, so sit down and shut up. You don't even have the stats to have an opinion here." Derek was about to go feral, but the guild leader barked, "Sit down or get banned from the server." Orhan turned to grill Oliver. "What were you even thinking? Why would you drag a newbie support down to floor 92 on her literal first day on the job?" He mockingly asked if Oliver thought it was a walk in the park just because he'd been there before. Orhan hit the nail on the head, leaving Oliver speechless, but he was still too full of himself to admit it. Orhan absolutely roasted Oliver for that brain-dead decision, reminding him that he'd specifically warned him not to try hard down there with mid-tier skills. Oliver remembered, but he was still delusional, thinking that since he found a support with better stats than Orhan, diving into the deep floors would be easy money. This guy is actually a lost cause at this point. Orhan didn't even care about getting fired anymore, but what really triggered him was how Oliver remained clueless, refusing to understand the actual value of an enchanter, also known as the broken buff bot. Oliver doubled down on his copium, arguing that he obviously knows the value of an enchanter, that's why he hired a new one. But the second he opened his mouth, Orhan knew he had zero game sense regarding the role. So, Orhan started a rap diss, listing off every single team member's magic resistance stats and buff durations like a literal human supercomputer. He gave Oliver a brain reset, explaining that a real enchanter has to memorize all that data, shot call for the whole squad, and map hack the enemy movements all at the same time. He mockingly asked if Oliver's low-tier brain could even handle that workload or if he was just all bark and no bite. Scene changed to the Silver Rabbits HQ. The trio Logan, Sophia, and Caroline were vibing and spilling tea about their idol Orhan's future. They hadn't seen a trace of him since yesterday, but the kids thought if Orhan officially joined the squad at Silver Rabbits, it would be hype as hell. They could fangirl all day. So the whole group locked in the plan to go invite him immediately. Meanwhile, out in the garden, Selma was sitting in her feels, overthinking about Orhan. She really wanted him in the guild, but she was feeling insecure. With such a massive skill gap, she was scared she'd be useless and just a deadweight dragging him down. A bit later, the kids ran up asking for Orhan's home address. Selma asked what they needed it for, and they kept it 100, admitting they were going to recruit him. Selma shut it down instantly, saying it wasn't a good look and that they'd just be getting in his way, but these kids were unfazed. They admitted they were being selfish, but they wanted to cling to. Learn from him until they were cracked enough to actually stand on the same level as Orhan. Hearing the kids talk gave Selma a total brain blast, making her realize she could actually grind to close the gap instead of just sitting there being emo. So she gave the green light for the kids to go convince Orhan, but she strictly refused to leak his home address to keep people from harassing him. Instead, she dropped a pin on his location, saying Orhan just finished a meeting at the guild and they better speedrun there to catch him. Meanwhile, Orhan just stepped out of the guild after he finished his report. His old squad was officially cooked, facing a mountain of fines for causing a public disturbance. Just as he was about to head home for a mental health break, he spotted the kids charging toward him like a zombie horde. Sensing a massive threat level of annoyance, Orhan ducked into an alley and started legging it. Unfortunately, his injuries from yesterday meant he couldn't outrun the kids' unlimited cardio. In a desperate move, Orhan toggled hacks, creating mana platforms to parkour onto the rooftops to hide. Watching the kids run past below, he let out a huge sigh of relief, but he still had to stay low-key and breathe quietly. Just as he was about to head home for a mental health break, he spotted the kids charging toward him like a zombie horde. Sensing a massive threat level of annoyance, Orhan ducked into an alley and started legging it. Unfortunately, his injuries from yesterday meant he couldn't outrun the kids' unlimited cardio. In a desperate move, Orhan toggled hacks, creating mana platforms to parkour onto the rooftops to hide. Watching the kids run past below, he let out a huge sigh of relief, but he still had to stay low-key and breathe quietly. That night, Orhan hiked up the hill to catch some fresh air and clear his head. By total random chance, Sophia was walking by and spotted him. She took the opportunity to give him a proper thank you for saving her life, then made her move and invited him to join the Silver Rabbits. Before answering, Orhan Uno reversed her and asked what the clan actually meant to her. Sophia said the Silver Rabbits taught her everything, gave her core memories, and most importantly, it was the place where she belonged. That final blow hit Orhan right in the feels, leading him to make his final decision. The next morning, Orhan met with the big boss and locked in the deal, officially joining the Silver Rabbits. The boss was hyped, and Selma brought out his official fit so he could gear up. When the guild members heard the leak, they all rushed out to give him a warm welcome, and Orhan was actually wholesome and friendly back. And that's a wrap for episode 7, besties. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the upcoming drama. Bye. Back in the day, Orhan and Oliver were constantly grinding and sparring together. Then one day, Orhan pulled a fake out and let Oliver catch the W in a friendly match. The adults watching from the sidelines saw Oliver secure the kill and immediately locked in their choice. That's the one, this kid is the chosen one to carry our stats. But Oliver was salty as hell, turning red and barking at Orhan to stop acting like a clown, because he knew for a fact Orhan was way more cracked than that. Still, Orhan just vibe checked him and said, "You've surpassed me, bro, just accept the glow up." Oliver stormed off, pressed because he knew his friend was just smoothing and throwing the game on purpose, but he had zero receipts, and he was right. Orhan was definitely sandbagging. If he actually played for real, he would have deleted Oliver in a split second. A few minutes later, Shaun walked up to troll Orhan, saying his loser act was totally cap. She called him out for pretending to be a noob. Orhan kept it 100 and admitted he was done sweating in matches. It wasn't because he was washed up, but because if the adults knew how OP he actually was, they'd dump a mountain of chores on him and make him hard carry all their expectations. However, because he gatekept his own talent, he accidentally pushed that entire burden onto Oliver, and now he was feeling guilty about it. So, the guy decided to go all in on being the support and paving the way for his bro. But Shaun snapped at him, calling him a clown for trying to carry the whole world on his shoulders alone. The baddie flexed that she had power levels similar to Orhan's, so no matter the cost, she'd grind until she was cracked enough to sit at the same table as him and finish the mission together. Ironically, Orhan's memories of Shaun kept glitching out, like someone had literally wiped his hard drive. Scene changed. The Grandmaster of the guild got hit with some breaking news from the southern region leader. Some random guy just soloed the Black Dragon in the southern dungeon with a single blade. The Grandmaster was stunned into silence, unable to believe the South had spawned such a goat warrior. Still, he trash-talked the move, saying soloing a Black Dragon was way too reckless. The leader corrected him. It wasn't a clout chase gone wrong. The dragon glitched through a portal and showed up uninvited, so it was an emergency move. The Grandmaster asked, curious, so, was it our boy Oliver who secured the bag? But the leader shook his head. Knowing it wasn't Oliver, the old man started panicking, because the only other name cracked enough in his head was Orhan, but that seemed delusional. He asked if Orhan had been acting sus lately. The leader said Orhan was just chilling as usual. Hearing that, the Grandmaster started overthinking if Orhan hadn't regained his old form. He must have found some illegal hacks to boost his stats. He ordered a 24/7 surveillance on Orhan immediately. Meanwhile, in the eastern region, a squad just cooked a whole group of adventurers in the forest, and Shan was right there on the slaughter team. Since this area is officially out of opponents to grind, the squad decided to bounce to a new spot, but Shan activated her radar and barked at the camper in the bushes to show their face. Turns out it was just a messenger boy from HQ. The tea was that a mage just popped off in the south, strong enough to solo a dragon. Shan's mission is to head down there and scout this player. If they're a griefer getting in the way, she's gotta delete them. Looking at the target's empty profile, Shan deduced it definitely wasn't Oliver. The best case scenario is recruiting this talent to the squad, but if they've already joined the church faction, it's game over for them. Shan threw the messenger a fake compliment and shooed him away. Then she turned to the crew, hyping them up to pack their bags and head to the Great Southern Dungeon. But since the south is basically the church's server, the whole squad has to stay low-key so they don't get banned. They also need to be careful approaching this dragon slayer because they don't know his stats. But that's exactly why Shan is so thirsty for a fight and wants to see for herself if the south really has a monster capable of that feat. She's the only one cracked enough to stop them. When it comes down to it, she has to fulfill Orhan's last wish at all costs. Yeah, Big Sis is being gaslit hard, convinced that Orhan logged out as a kid because of a fake death notice. Now she's on demon mode, blaming the church for Orhan's death and swearing to make them pay the price. Back in the south, Orhan was receiving a certificate of merit for hard carrying the students during the dragon breakout. Everyone agreed his power and lore knowledge were broken, and back when he was a carry bot for the hero party, he basically soloed all the logistics and management from A to Z. Because his resume was so stacked, the guild leader locked in the decision to promote Orhan to lieutenant, but to get the rank, he needs a 2/3 majority vote from the current lieutenants. The boss called for the vote. Right then, one lieutenant interrupted the chat, saying he needed to have a vibe check with Orhan first. He admitted Orhan was high tier but asked point blank, "Are you ready to give your life for the guild?" Since being a lieutenant means every decision risks the squad's lives, he had to put the guild's interests above all else. Orhan knew exactly why the guy was grilling him, but he'd made a blood oath a long time ago and forbade himself from meeting the Reaper before the job was done. So the guy made a bold statement: "Sorry bros, I'm not ready to sacrifice my one life for the silver rabbits." The lieutenants were stunned into silence, questioning why he even showed up if that was his attitude. In response, Orhan just dropped a low-key line: "I'm just here to protect the people I care about," he said. While he wasn't ready to trash his life for the guild, he'd go full sweat mode to keep his teammates safe. He doesn't give a flip about dying for the cause, but he cares about the squad's lives. That was enough for the lieutenants to give him the nod of approval. So the council locked in the deal and promoted him to the new lieutenant. After the meeting, Orhan and Selma were vibing in the hallway. Selma let out a sigh of relief that everything went smooth, then prepped to introduce Orhan to the whole Team 1 crew. But before they could bounce, Estella called them back, saying they needed to talk. Selma introed Estella as the HR manager of Silver Rabbits, and Big Sis got straight to the point: she needed Orhan to tutor the noobs who just joined the guild. Orhan wasn't pressed about teaching the fresh adventurers, but he was low-key worried he couldn't multitask being a teacher and a Team 1 manager. Selma patted his shoulder, telling him to chill because working here would be way more low effort than his days being a slave for the hero party. He wouldn't have to carry all the paperwork, and the guild actually has a rule banning anyone from camping in a dungeon for more than 3 days without a break. Orhan's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe the work-life balance here was actually cracked. With benefits this good, Orhan wasn't about to say no, so he accepted the quest to teach the newbies for Estella. Once that was settled, Big Sis exited the chat so Orhan could officially meet his new squad. Walking into the room, Orhan got introed to the Team 1 members. The whole group was lurking just to see the Dragon Slayer in real life, since they didn't get to ask for an autograph during their last shared mission. But let's keep it 100, Orhan didn't even realize they were actually there during that mission. Time for the meet and greet. The first one to open the floor was Rain. "Don't let the small aesthetic fool you, she's actually 24 years old." She told Orhan to just treat her like a big sis, but Orhan looked her up and down and couldn't find a single big thing about her, and Rain is super sensitive about being a member of the Flat Chest Committee. Next was Lucretia, the 18-year-old baddie, and finally Wilk, the 20-year-old who tanks for the whole squad. Selma is also on the team, but she skipped the intro. Now that the paperwork was done, Wilk was thirsty to know what forbidden hacks Orhan used to delete the Black Dragon. Selma tried to cover for him, saying he didn't have to spill the tea if he didn't want to, but Orhan thought revealing his build to his new teammates was a must. He explained that the main reason he secured the kill was thanks to 2 original spells he coded himself. The first move is called Impact, an enchantment spell that buffs weapon power by 100x. The whole squad was absolutely shook because a 100x multiplier literally didn't exist in the meta until now. Orhan dropped a second bomb. His next original spell allows him to stack a 32x multiplier on every single active reinforcement buff on his body. Hearing that, the whole squad turned into stone. But Orhan had to clarify he can only self-cast this move, and it drains his stamina like crazy, lasting only a few short seconds. Knowing how cracked Orhan is, everyone wondered why he didn't just multi-class and take over every other role in the squad, but that's actually one of Orhan's biggest Achilles heels. He admitted he can only cast mid-tier magic and below he literally can't buffer a single high-level spell. The group was floored by the news. In a moment of weakness, Orhan low-key panicked, thinking they'd label him a useless teammate. He tried to damage control by saying his original spells are more than enough to compensate for his lack of high-tier talent, but plot twist, they didn't give a flip about that. They pivoted the convo to ask if he had a unique skill, and he verified that he did. Rain started jumping for joy because now the squad has 3 gifted members with unique skills. Orhan was thirsty for the tea on who else had one, but Selma said it'd be easier to just show, don't tell by flexing in the dungeon, so she locked in a raid for the whole squad tomorrow. Orhan wasn't pressed, but he dropped the sad news that his sword was deleted after the dragon fight, so he needed new toys. The group's faces fell, thinking they were in trouble because forging a new blade takes days, but Orhan was unfazed, saying he'd just hit up a local weapon shop and grab whatever basic gear was on the shelf. The whole squad lagged, unable to believe a dragon slayer would use budget market-tier swords. The squad decided they weren't letting that mess happen. They dragged Orhan to meet the Silver Rabbit's personal blacksmith, Uncle Aaron, demanding he forge Orhan a god-tier blade. Aaron accepted the quest but said there was a glitch in the plan. To forge a sword for a monster like Orhan, he needed special materials found only in the deepest dungeon floors. His warehouse was currently out of stock, so if they wanted the sword, they'd have to grind for the materials themselves. Luckily, Orhan had been hoarding a whole stash of rare materials in his bracelet since his hero party days. He had zero use for them, so he yeeted them over to be smelted into his new blade. And that's the full tea for episode 8. Smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next drop. While waiting, Selma updated the squad that the Adventurer HQ just dropped a new KPI requiring them to farm venomous sheepskins. This is the ultimate golden hour to test their teamwork on floor 86. Orhan was fully hyped, swearing to carry the squad so Selma and the gang could absolutely shred the floor 94 record held by those poser heroes. In the blink of an eye, the whole team touched down on floor 86. The view here was actually chill, looking high tier and not like some gloomy basement. But Selma warned everyone to wake up. If they go sheep hunting while AFK in the head, the Earth Dragons will literally delete them. The main goal of this trip was to check the receipts on how smooth the team's synergy was with the new guy, Orhan. The game plan was locked in fast. Wilk and Orhan would handle the front line, Rain would spam spells from a distance, Lucretia was on heals, and Selma would handle the buffs and shot calling. Everyone in the squad knew Orhan could solo the entire map, so the formation was mostly just for the aesthetic. Selma said if Orhan wanted to go full main character and solo, it was okie dokie, but the guy declined, insisting that as a new member, he needed to vibe check with the group and stick to boss Selma's script. Right in the middle of being serious, a fireball came out of nowhere for a jump scare attack. Orhan's brain lagged for 0 seconds as he jumped up and deployed a shield to babysit the whole squad. The guy knew this was a welcome gift from the Earth Dragons, but looking around, he couldn't spot a single one. That's when Lucretia's cheat code came into play. Thanks to her magic radar, she sniffed out the dragon camping in the bushes and yeeted a flare to force it to show its face. Seeing the loot, Wilk charged in to flex on Orhan. While Wilk played the tank to pull aggro, Rain buffered her energy in the back and dropped an explosion that one-tapped the dragon out of existence. Orhan was stunned by the team's god-tier speed at taking out the trash. Wilk was tanky as a literal fortress, Rain's casting speed was 2x faster than a normal mage, and Lucretia had a radar specifically for mobs playing hide-and-seek. Everyone was cracked in their own way, but the peak of it all was Selma's leader energy gluing everyone together. Right after he finished glazing them, 2 more Earth Dragons entered the chat. Orhan and Wilk immediately sent it to start the combat. While speedrunning ahead, Orhan's own radar glitched, signaling a bad vibe. The guy hit the brakes and sniped a stone bullet into the grass by the road. Boom! A camouflaged turtle showed its receipts. Luckily Orhan checked the VAR just in time, or the whole squad would have been backstabbed. Now things were intense. The team was sandwiched between a pack of mobs. Seeing the turtle was lagging, Selma pivoted the plan, assigning Rain and Lucretia to handle it while leaving the dragons for Orhan and Wilk to delete. Orhan got fired up, getting hyped because he realized Selma was a verified boss he could actually trust with his back on the battlefield. Suddenly, Orhan was shook when he heard Selma's voice echoing inside his head. Thinking he was losing it, Selma explained this was her telepathy ultimate, used for instant DMs over long distances. Orhan's eyes were wide as saucers because it was his first time being enlightened by such high-tech magic. Selma was busy as hell in combat, so she quickly ordered Orhan to aim for the dragon's weak point while Wilk distracted it. Orhan followed the instructions perfectly, buffing himself, timing it just right. The guy unleashed a head-splitting slash, yeeting 2 dragon heads into the air. At the same time, Rain and Lucretia closed the file on the turtle. With the trash cleared, the squad went back to looting in peace. Selma turned to Orhan to ask for his first impression of their synergy. Orhan gave a light flex, saying it was absolute goals and that it had been forever since he had such a low-effort W. While smooth teamwork should be the bare minimum for a pro squad, Orhan had been gaslit and abused by that toxic hero party for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to actually have cracked teammates. Selma followed up by asking if the team was ready to speedrun floor 92. Orhan verified it with 0 cap, saying they were more than ready. Selma teased him, asking if the team was only this OP because he joined, but Orhan got serious and said even without him, everyone was built different enough to delete those dragons on their own. Hearing Orhan blaze their power levels, the whole squad was hyped as hell. Still, Selma remembered Orhan going demon mode against that dragon the other day. She knew how dangerous those mobs were and didn't want anyone to log out due to overconfidence, so she begged Orhan to go full support mode. Orhan laughed it off, telling her not to be extra, as he was already locked in to dedicate his entire soul to babysitting Team 1. Seeing that clearing floor 92 was everyone's long-term dream, Orhan swore to make sure everything went smoothly with zero risks. Once the main quest was done, the squad harvested the venomous sheepskins and prepped to head back to the surface to get some grub. In the blink of an eye, everyone huddled up to thank Orhan for his god-tier skinning skills. Without him, they'd probably be lagging there until morning. Orhan humbly said it was no biggie. Mission complete. Now it was time for Orhan's official welcome party. The squad started pouring honey in Orhan's ears, thanking such a pro player for joining their mid-team when he could have easily submitted his resume to any top-tier guild after the dragon-slaying feat. They swore to sweat their hardest so Orhan wouldn't regret his choice. Orhan gave a wholesome smile, saying there was no way he'd ever regret being a part of the squad. Suddenly, Lucretia started tearing up, moved by how chill and friendly Orhan was, with zero ego toward the weaker members. Turns out it wasn't just her. Wilk and Rain were also low-key shook earlier, scared of getting ghosted by him. But the tea quickly shifted towards Selma, as the whole squad agreed she was the one stressing the most and had her eyes on Orhan since day one. The team started shipping them, speculating that Selma caught feelings for Orhan at first sight. Selma denied the allegations instantly, claiming that as the leader, she just wanted the newbie to vibe well, but her face was red as a tomato from the cringe. To hide her embarrassment, she started chugging alcohol like water. A few minutes later, she was wasted and started spilling the tea from the bottom of her heart. She kept saying Orhan was fine as hell, then leaned in to drop some 18 pickup lines that would give anyone a nosebleed. Orhan was sweating bullets from the awkwardness and quickly turned to Rain for a save, but unlucky for him, Rain was just as clobbered. Instead of helping him, Rain actually asked for a slot to join in the nighttime fun as well. Wilk and Lucretia just sat there lurking and laughing at the drama, trolling Orhan by saying he could just solo both of the girls all night long and they'd be okie dokie watching. But for Orhan, that was literally the nightmare scenario of a lifetime. The situation started getting down bad and heating up way past the limit, making the guy low-key panic and almost throw in the towel. Right in the clutch moment during stoppage time, his brain lagged and remembered he had a sleep ultimate, so he immediately spat the spell to knock out both wasted girls instantly. Orhan let out a massive sigh of relief because he dodged that cancel-worthy bullet by a thread. Even though it was a total mess, looking back, it had been forever since he had a LMFAO night like this, so he actually felt wholesome inside. Late that night, at Selma and Sophia's place. Sophia was sitting on fire because Selma hadn't showed her face yet, even though she knew Big Sis was out on a side quest with Orhan. Staying in the dungeon this late usually meant you were cooked. She was just pacing around overthinking what kind of extra stuff Selma was doing out there. Right then, a knock hit the door. Thinking it was the messy Big Sis finally home, Sophia scurried to open it, but the second her hand touched the knob, Orhan's voice entered the chat, sending her into a state of local cardiac arrest. Sophia's main character syndrome kicked in fast. She was like, wait, does he know I'm home alone and he's pulling up for a raid? But the second she opened the door, her delusional dreams shattered when she saw Orhan piggybacking a completely wasted Selma. Sophia's brain started running deadlines at light speed, scrolling through 1001 mood swings to analyze how far these two had progressed to be shipped together overnight like this. Reading Sophia's shook expression instantly, Orhan hurried to clear his name. The guy gave a 100% no-cap guarantee that nothing sus happened between him and Selma. It was just that she chugged too much alcohol at dinner, so he had to DoorDash her back to bed for her own safety. Sophia let out a sigh of relief like a huge weight was lifted, because she was stressing that Big Sis had stolen her crush, but seeing how Selma was clinging to Orhan like glue, she was still salty as hell. Sophia immediately started shaking Selma, hitting her with a serious face and ordering her to get down right now. Just one death stare with physical damage from Sophia's pressed face was enough to make Selma sober up instantly. After Orhan ghosted the scene, Sophia dragged Selma onto the bed and started a full interrogation, demanding the tea on every single detail that went down between her and Orhan. After hearing the receipts, Sophia breathed a second sigh of relief knowing her crush was still pure, and the only reason Orhan carried her was because she was clobbered at the welcome party. Still, she kept the situation and warned Selma she wasn't allowed to harass Orhan like that again. Selma apologized left and right, and seeing that, Sophia softened up, saying she didn't need to say sorry since it was just an unlucky accident and not like she planned it. While soaking in the tub, Selma started deep thinking about the vibe of her life. She realized since Orhan joined the squad, she'd been way more chill and relaxed. That was a W, but she swore to herself she'd never lose her dignity and cross the line like she did tonight again. Clearly, she knew Sophia was simping for Orhan, and she had zero intention of being a gatecrasher or catching a snake reputation for stealing her bestie's man. However, the very fact that she was stressing about Sophia's feelings was hard evidence that Selma had already fallen for Orhan too. She was just out here gaslighting herself. And that's the explosive finale that closes out our episode 9. An immortal loli with a passion for self-destruction just gave her teacher a total mental breakdown, and her lab rat dark past is finally out in the open. What god tier strats will Orhan use to carry this squad of rookie problem children through the dungeon? If you're vibing with the content, smash that like button and subscribe to support the shop now. Gear up and let's dive straight into episode 10. That night, Orhan started checking the receipts on his students' files and almost fainted because everyone's background was straight up tragic, especially Caroline's. The next day, Selma walked Orhan to the admin office to officially lock in his role as a coach. That's where he ran into Estella and Carla, the mama bear in charge of the newbies. Carla was literally tearing up with joy when she heard Orhan was willing to hard carry those 3 kids. She asked if he'd finished scouting their files yet. Orhan verified he'd done a deep dive into their profiles, knew all their past lore, and was still fully committed to the grind. Carla was hyped because it saved her from a long-winded explanation. Orhan asked if there were any specific KPIs or rules, but Estella shut it down, saying they don't really do the corporate thing here. Orhan was told to just let it rip and pass on every pro tip he had. Seeing that Orhan was a bit laggy on where to start, Selma begged Estella to set a low-key target for him to aim for. Big Sis directed Orhan to level the kids up until they could solo the middle floors comfortably. The target was high-key difficult, but since the kids were cracked with potential, Orhan did the math and accepted the quest. On the way out, Selma kept the exit to ask if Orhan knew the full soap opera drama between her and Sophia yet. Orhan confirmed he'd heard the tea and was low-key shook. Turns out, Sophia was a maid for the Claude family. Even though she was adopted after her mom logged out of life, she was still labeled an illegitimate child and treated like absolute trash. Selma carried the burden of protecting her for a long time, but once she left to become an adventurer, Sophia's life turned into a living nightmare. It got so bad that when Selma visited, she told Sophia they were moving out together. That's why Selma is so locked in on making Sophia a top-tier adventurer and begged Orhan to give her some special treatment. A bit later, Orhan officially spawned in front of his students. The kids were standing him, hyped to be taught by a big brain teacher strong enough to one-tap a dragon. But Orhan thought they were glazing him way too hard, since he almost uninstalled himself during that dragon solo last time. He took the chance to scare them, saying they'd eventually have to face a black dragon themselves if they wanted to clear the game. Even though their current stats were mid, he was 100% no-cap certain they'd make it if they put in the grind. He dropped 2 law of the jungle rules for the course. Rule 1, once you hit the floor, your brain has to stay active. No playing like a bot following a script, you have to be shifty and adapt to the vibes of the battle. Rule number 2, don't treat the teacher's word as gospel. Orhan kept it 100, admitting he's just a regular guy who's made clown moves a million times and will probably throw the game again in the future. So, if he starts talking delusional nonsense, the kids are expected to call him out immediately. With the syllabus set, he started interviewing them on their motivations. Sophie went first, dropping the tea that she's only in this to stan her idol, Selma. She's thirsty for that total freedom to do whatever, even though right now, she has 0 clues what she actually wants. For now, the plan is just to grind until she hits VIP adventurer status. Next up was Logan, coming through with a get rich or die trying energy. It sounded a bit like a scripted PR answer, so Orhan pressed him for the real receipts. Turns out, Logan's hometown is down bad. It's a dirt-poor village where the soil is basically dust and rocks. The villagers saw his potential and pulled a crowdfunding move to ship him to the city to chase his dreams. Now, he's sweating the grind just to pay back the day ones who invested in him. Finally, it was Carol's turn. She was totally unfazed, claiming she has no deep reason, she just deletes monsters to keep people smiling. Because, at the end of the day, if people are happy, they won't use her as a human punching bag like they did back in the day. She dropped that lore with such a deadpan face that Orhan immediately sniffed out some major trauma from her past. Wisely, he decided not to dig up the receipts on those scars right now and just let it slide. Having checked the vibes on their mental states, Orhan told them to keep their goals locked in for motivation. Sophie pulled an Uno reverse and asked him the same, so he confessed his life goal is to get cracked enough to never lose anyone close to him again. He realized a long time ago that being weak means you can't protect anyone, so he's going to grind until he's top tier and untouchable. He also set the boundaries, telling them he won't treat them like fragile newbies. He expects them to go full sweat mode with 100% effort during training, and the kids instantly locked in. After that, Orhan asked to give Caroline a nickname because her name is a paragraph long. By the time you finish calling her in a clutch moment, you'd already be game over. Carol vibed with the logic and settled on Carol, and she seemed low-key hype about it. Seeing the special treatment, Logan and Sophie started getting salty gato and demanded their own shortened tags. Finally, Orhan locked in log for Logan and Sophie for Sophia. With all the boring paperwork out of the way, the squad touched grass, or rather, touched dungeon for some real-world combat. Carol was assigned a few wolves for a vibe check on her skills. She charged in with her twin daggers on demon mode, but watching her mosh pit style had Orhan sweating bullets because her combat flow was absolutely unhinged. Normally, a tank like her shouldn't be thirsting for the kill, she should just be gatekeeping the area and pulling aggro so the main DPS can secure the bag. But instead of playing it smart, she was out here taking suicidal risks and playing extra as hell. After she deleted one wolf, a second one tried to pull a dirty move and flank Carol from behind. Teacher Orhan decided that was enough for one day. He flew in, gatekept the wolf, and Kaya said kill steal the mob before it could take a bite out of her. Once the dust settled, he started preaching about the importance of keeping your radar active during combat. But Carol clapped back immediately, claiming she knew exactly what was up and was just baiting the mob by acting fragile. Orhan was shook, asking why she'd take such a clown risk when things could go south, but she acted like it was no biggie. To prove her point, she pulled out her dagger and literally sliced her own arm right in front of Orhan, all while wearing a smile bright as a sunflower. Orhan's heart skipped a beat from the jump scare, and he rushed over to stop the bleeding, but then, a glitch in the matrix happened, the wound closed up instantly, healing like nothing ever happened. She explained that this is her special passive basically, she's immortal as hell, even though it still stings to get hit, she's used to the pain and told her teacher to just chill and stop stressing. Side note, Carol's lore is deep and dark as a black hole. Turns out, she was kidnapped and gay-kept by the Cyclamen Church for years because of this broken passive. Those villains had some bottom-tier plans to use her as a lab rat for hundreds of brutal experiments, all to respawn an evil god. By the time she was saved by the crew, her body was physically fine, but her mental health was down bad. Even after some rehab to try and vibe with society again, deep down, she's still hoarding a mountain of trauma she refuses to check VAR on. Normally, Orhan would just ignore the red flags and let her live in her Delula world, but since he promised not to treat them like kids, he snapped Carol back to reality. He made her look at Log and Sophie's faces. They were pressed and worried sick, which actually made Carol panic because she couldn't math out why they weren't smiling. She's obsessed with keeping her teammates happy and assumed they'd be hyped that she was tanking all the damage. Orhan brain reset her, explaining they couldn't smile because watching her get wrecked was gut-wrenching for them. Carol tried to gaslight him, saying the scratches heal in seconds, but he hit her with the facts. The physical wounds spawn quickly, but the pain is 100% real, and knowing she's hurting makes her teammates feel the exact same damage. Self-sabotage is one thing, but hurting her day ones was something Carol couldn't vibe with. She started crying in the club, begging Orhan for a tutorial on how to fix this. He locked in the solution: she just needs to stop being unhinged and quit hurting herself on purpose. Carol instinctively dropped her daggers, spamming apologies over and over. Orhan tried to step in for a wholesome comfort move, but Carol instinctively flinched, begging him not to hit her. Turns out, during her lab rat days, every mistake earned her a physical ban. But Orhan pulled her into a hug, locking in a promise that from now on, nobody is allowed to lay a hand on her. Now, Carol finally realized she can't just rely on her broken healing and let mobs farm her face. She has to respec her entire build because she's been playing on demon mode for so long she forgot how to actually parry or dodge. Orhan yeeted her into his custom VR training room to grind those evasion stats. While Carol was busy sweating the dodge drills, Orhan pulled Logan aside and made him multi-class into a spearman. The goal: turn him into a versatile carry instead of just a buff bot standing around. As for Sophie, he had her doing mental gymnastics, counting backward from 1000 by 7s while maintaining 2 magic circles simultaneously. It was a multitasking masterclass designed to prevent her brain from buffering during a raid. The information overload had her lagging, but Orhan shut it down. Lose focus on the battlefield, and you're griefing the whole team. Your squad is counting on you to hard carry. He talked a big game, but Sophie was still fumbling the bag, accidentally pointing her staff at the target. Normally, nothing would happen, but suddenly, a cracked amount of power surged from her body, deleting the target without her even typing a chant. After hearing the report, Orhan started theory crafting, betting that Sophie was finally unlocking a unique skill. She was feeling mid and didn't think she had the stats for it, but considering she shares top-tier DNA with her big sis Selma, Orhan was 100% no-cap sure it was happening. After a few days of grinding, the glow-up was real. Carol was weaving through attacks like a pro, Logan's spear game was fire, and Sophie finally maxed out her multitasking ping. Their team power was high enough to solo clear floor 20 now, but becoming VIP tier adventurers still required a massive amount of XP. Right then, Orhan got paged to exit the chat. The blacksmith had finally finished rendering his custom, god tier blade. With just one test swing, he knew this sword was made for him, smooth as butter with zero input lag. He gave the blacksmith a massive shout out and swore to use this legendary drop to protect everything he loves. And that secures the bag for episode 10. Make sure to smash that like button, share, and drop a comment to support the channel. Catch you day ones in the next video. Bye bye. Armed with a god tier weapon, our lead adventurer is officially locked in to carry the squad to the finish line. Orhan immediately took his new blade for a vibe check on floor 91 of the Southern Great Labyrinth, and let's just say it was satisfying as hell. Every slash hit like a truck, and Orhan finally understood why Aaron is the VIP blacksmith for the Silver Rabbits. Wilt gave a nod of approval to the craftsmanship but dropped the receipts. The real reason this sword is so cracked is because it's made from high-quality black dragon scales. Rain added some insider tea, mentioning that Aaron mixed in some armored turtle blood from a previous hunt, which low-key nerfed the durability just a bit. Orhan wasn't pressed about the durability, since he can easily buff the blade's hardness with magic. Lucretia asked about the name, and Orhan proudly flexed, its name is Charges. The squad thought the name sounded a bit mid, so Orhan quickly explained the lore. In the ancient tongue, it means black rabbit, chosen specifically to represent the guild. Wilk suggested that Black Dragon would have sounded way more fire since it's made from dragon parts, but the newbie stood his ground. He wanted the name to celebrate his first day with the organization, plus, Team 1's ultimate goal is to clear the game, and since the Black Dragon was just a gatekeeper in his way, there was no way he was naming his legendary drop after it. Speaking of dragon hunts, Selma decided the team was finally cracked enough to hit floor 92, aiming to delete the most notorious monster in the area. By late afternoon, the squad dragged themselves out of the dungeon after a long day of sweating, ready for a bath and a cold one, but Selma pulled Orhan aside to plan the floor 92 raid. Orhan vetoed the idea. "Sorry sis, I already promised to take my students out for a spin tomorrow." Selma started stressing, worried Orhan hadn't recharged his battery enough for a major boss fight. Orhan told her to chill. Tomorrow he was just there for a vibe check on the kids and wouldn't even input any commands. The kids' stats are out of this world now, so floor 29 should be a walk in the park. Selma had to give them their flowers. Those kids are ranking up at a scary pace. Once they pass floor 30, they're officially pro-tier adventurers. That night, Orhan met with his grandfather and received some bad news. The rumor mill says a gang called Amanthith, basically an anti-adventurer guild, is griefing players in the southern Great Labyrinth. These guys are a notorious criminal org, on par with the Cyclamen cult. Their toxic logic is to gatekeep the labyrinth, forbidding anyone from clearing it, and if you try to push for the win, they'll try to uninstall you from life. The Adventurer Guild is still lagging on the info, but Orhan's grandpa heard several high-level players already logged out, so he told his grandson to stay extra careful. Orhan was triggered hearing that, unable to math out why these delusional fanatics would throw the game for everyone else, but you can't expect logic from cultists. With the situation getting high-key intense, he asked his grandpa for a backup hand. Meanwhile, Rain Hugwell was having a moment with the blood-stained cloak of Albert, their fallen teammate. The mage uses the cloak as a link to Albert's soul so he can spectate how Team 1 is slaying their missions. At the same time, Wilk Savory brought back his freshly buffed gear from Aaron's shop, locking in his resolve to solo the Black Dragon. The blacksmith praised Wilk for being built different, saying anyone else would have quit the server a long time ago. Wilk was still in his feels, blaming his own skill issue for Albert's death, thinking he should have been the one to game over, but since he survived, he's determined to make it count. His only goal now is payback. Finally, Lucretia Otis was deep thinking in the garden, doing a self-audit. Team 1 has been grinding harder than any other squad for a year, but she was still anxious, worried they weren't meta enough yet. She figured if Albert saw her overthinking like this, he'd clown her for sure. She made a blood oath right then, she's not losing another teammate period. Over at the HQ, Selma Clottle was listening to her sister Sophia cry her eyes out. The poor kid was down bad with anxiety, terrified her sister would log out permanently while fighting the Black Dragon, since that beast is basically a raid boss on steroids. Sophie was spiraling, wishing her big sis would just stay home and vibe forever. Selma tried to comfort her, but Sophie showed she's grown up real fast, acknowledging her sister's duty to carry the squad. She hugged Selma and flexed that Orhan had promoted her to team leader to prove her bravery. Sophie's manifesting a win, betting her Team 1 mage sister will delete the dragon. Selma was shook by the maturity, feeling like her little sis had officially leveled up. With that sibling motivation, Selma got a 200% power buff and promised to turn that monster into loot. The next day, Team 10 touched down in the southern Great Labyrinth. After clearing floor 29, the squad was hyped because they were about to finish the tutorial stage of their careers. Crossing floor 30 means hitting mid-tier status, giving them the green light to join Team 3 as pro-adventurers. Carol and Logan were absolutely popping off. Sophie felt a bit emo about graduating from Orhan's class, but she promised to go hard regardless. Once the grind was over, Team 10 hit the admin office to grab their floor 30 permits from the baddie Estella. To keep it legit, the guild sent a Team 2 adventurer as a proctor to make sure the kids weren't cheating the test. Carol was salty, asking why they needed a proctor when their GOAT teacher was already there. Estella ghosted the complaint and locked in the departure for the day after tomorrow. Unlucky for them, that day overlapped with Team 1's big dragon raid. The HR manager complained that the proctors were booked and busy, making a schedule change feel like mission impossible. Orhan thought about lagging the dragon raid to stay with the kids, but Sophie vetoed that immediately. This was Selma's life goal, and she wasn't letting a side quest ruin her sister's big moment. Seeing the vibe, Logan and Carol boldly asked Orhan to let them solo the floor. Sophie flexed, "Teacher taught us all the boss strats, we got this." The kids insisted this was their coming-of-age test. They had to stand on business with their own 2 feet to be real adventurers. Orhan saw they were locked in and softened up, agreeing on one condition: they had to submit a detailed strategy for approval first. Back at the guild, Orhan double-checked the receipts on their battle plan. Since it was cracked and solid, he signed the hall pass immediately. But the teacher still gave them a pro tip: the plan is one thing, but reality is a mess. Keep your eyes on 360 vision at all times. He carefully gifted each of them a protection amulet just in case. So, both Team 10 and Team 1 spent their time sweating the prep for the upcoming storm mission that would change the meta for everyone. On the chosen day, the squads assembled at the labyrinth entrance. Orhan watched Estella lead his 3 newbies away, then joined the lobby with Team 1 to head deep into the dungeon. Over with Team 10, they hadn't even gone far when Logan's radar pinged 3 mobs a few seconds later, for Goblins entered the chat. The male mage scratched his head, apologizing for the math fail. Sophie laughed it off. No biggie, stick to the script. Carol pulls aggro, I'll spam spells from the back. No cap, Carol charged in as the tanker. Logan used stone thorns to impale 3 goblins at once, and Sophie secured the bag with Windblade, slicing the 4th one into confetti in a split second. The proctor's jaw dropped because they cleared the trash so fast. Wait, are you guys actually rookies? The 3 shouted in unison. It's just because our teacher is cracked, sis. Scene changed to the Black Dragon's boss room. Selma asked the squad if they were ready for the drama. Everyone nodded and kicked the door down. Before they could even say hi, the dragon hit them with a pre-fire blast of flames. Seeing the boss, Team 1 was shaking in their boots but hyped for the fight. The moment for Albert's revenge has finally spawned. Selma immediately spammed her attack and defense buffs on the squad, while Orhan hit himself with a 4-attribute self-buff. Back over at Team 10, the kids just reached the boss room only to find another squad already gatekeeping the spot. Thinking they were just regular adventurers, Log ran up to play diplomat. Yo, what's up? We're from the Silver Rabbits, here to clear the boss. The giant tank of the other group recognized the guild name, and the baddie next to him dropped the T. That's the guild with the Dragon Slayer guy, you idiot. At the mention of the Dragon Slayer, the giant's eyes turned red as he stared the kids down. You guys mutuals with that dude. The proctor, who was lurking in the back to let the kids solo, sensed the toxic vibes and rushed in. Right then, the girl in the white hood ordered her teammate Zuriel to check the receipts on whether these kids were actually connected to the Dragon Slayer. He activated his heavenly eye and leaked the info. Not only are they mutuals, they're his star pupils. Talk about a sweet deal. Using these kids as bait for Orhan was a pro gamer move. Back at the Dragon Raid, Orhan screamed a warning about a tail whip coming in hot. Wilkes stood on business, tanking the massive blow like a literal god before Uno reversing with a strike that pierced the dragon's armor. Seeing the gap, Orhan charged in with a steel punch that deleted the dragon's tail. Team 1 had spent the entire year watching the VODs of their last loss, learning from their skill issues, so their combat flow was now smooth as butter. Since Orhan joined the lobby, they'd been theory crafting this exact counterplay. Meanwhile, the situation for Team 10 was high-key intense. The brave proctor tried to protect the kids, but before she could even input a command, she was uninstalled from the server in a split second. Shook by the sudden violence, the 3 kids tried to log out and run. But the giant tank used earth magic to hardlock every exit. Sophie screamed, "What do you guys even want?" Zuriel laughed, "It's just unlucky for you. Blame the fact that you're friends with the Dragon Slayer." The giant wanted to 1v1 the kids, and the girl agreed since she wanted to save her mana for the main event with Orhan. Team 10 finally mathed it out. These griefers were out for Orhan's head. Without waiting for orders, Carol decided to hard carry. I'll pull the aggro, you two find a way to break the wall and escape. Despite her demon mode energy, the second Carol charged, she ate a heavy punch from the giant that yeeted her into the wall, leaving her glitched and unable to move. The giant trolled her, "You're lucky you jumped when I swung, or you would have been permanent banned right there." The hooded girl warned them, "Just stay low-key and nobody else gets hurt." Sophie was in total despair, clutching the amulet Orhan had gifted her. Over at the raid, Team 1 just vandalized the dragon's left wing. Selma was shouting to focus the right wing when Orhan saw the protection amulet glow. Signal received, Team 10 was in the trenches. Hearing the news, Selma almost fainted because her little sis was in that group. Orhan lost his focus and stopped attacking, which led to Wilk eating a fireball straight to the face. Orhan did the math, the black dragon was low HP, but securing the kill would still take too long. By the time they finished, Team 10 would be dead as a doornail. Selma wanted to full send the team to finish the boss fast, but she was scared that rushing it would lead to a total party wipe. She loved her sister, but as the leader, she couldn't just throw the lives of her Team 1 squad for a side quest. In a peak move of griefing, the Black Dragon used a mass heal ultimate, resetting every bit of damage they'd dealt. Just like that, all their grinding was for nothing. Team 1 was stuck in a nightmare scenario, while Team 10's lives were literally counting down by the second, and that secures the bag for episode 11. Don't forget to check out the videos on your screen and subscribe to stay notified for the next drop, besties. The problem child dragon just toggled infinite health mode, leaving the entire squad stunned into silence, while Big Boss Orhan makes a grand entrance to handle these early game trash talkers. What's his move? Stick around for the insane drama in episode 12, besties. While the rookie squad is being gatekept by a pack of cold-blooded assassins, Sophia is stressing over Caroline, but Logan gives her a vibe check, reminding her that Carol is built for the heal tank lifestyle, so they just need to stay calm while shaking in their boots. Priority 1 is survival, so the crew is locking in to go full demon mode. Logan spammed every defensive buff in his kit to shield the team, while Sophia opened the floor with a lightning arrow only for the guy Heya to swat it away like a text from an ex. Luckily, while Heya was busy thirsting for the kill, he tripped right into a stone trap Logan copy-pasted from Orhan's playbook. Logan was ready to celebrate that major fail, but Heya clutched up, escaped the trap, and yeeted Logan across the room. Just as Heya was about to permanently ban Logan for making him salty, his entire body glitched and froze for 5 seconds. Turns out, in that clutch moment, Sophia unlocked a telekinetic unique skill, slamming Heya into the wall to buy time to get Logan to a safe zone. Heya is pressed as hell now, and his squad is losing their patience because his performance is looking mid. Heya isn't about to be labeled trash, so he talked big, promising to secure the bag immediately. Sophia and Logan prepped to combo their magic for a final stand. Meanwhile, over at Orhan's side, things are looking absolutely cooked. The dragon didn't just reset its HP, it changed its entire playstyle, using broken and toxic moves that were way harder to read. At this rate, they'd be grinding until next year without ever saving the kids. Orhan was forced to pull out forbidden hacks that weren't even fully rendered yet. He used transformation magic on his blade, deleting the dragon's leg in one hit. But just as hope spawned, the dragon started auto-healing again. Orhan realized if this boss has infinite sustain, the only way to win the game is a one-tap finisher, which is a high-key difficult ask. Right then, the dragon started spamming tail whips. Selma had to hard carry with a protective barrier, but she couldn't tank the boss's raw power. She got yeeted back and logged out unconscious. The squad was about to become target practice as the dragon prepped its fire breath, but luckily, Orhan flanked it from the cliffs above. He transformed his sword into a spear and pulled a god-tier jump, shredding the dragon's skull and officially sending it back to the main menu. Selma was relieved, but after soaking up all that damage, she fainted right after. Back to Sophia and Logan. The two tried to team up against Heya, but honestly, they had zero chance. Logan took so much true damage he told Sophia to run, but Heya already had her locked as the primary target. This assassin squad has a toxic habit of deleting genius players before they can level up, so once they saw Sophia's unique skill, they decided to uninstall her immediately. Sophia was so shook she fell to her knees to pray and talk about a fast response time before Heya could swing. A slash out of nowhere yeeted him away in a split second. Orhan makes a high-key cinematic entrance from the shadows, dropping a my bad for the late join, but the man traveled at light speed to get there. After a quick vibe check to make sure Sophie is still solid, Orhan teleports Logan and Carol to his coordinates, deploys a protective barrier, and prepares to solo the entire map. The Amantheth crew is still talking big, thinking there's no way Orhan wins a 1v3. Plot twist: Orhan drops a gravity spell that forces the assassins to stand on business by literally kneeling in apology. Only the baddie Shaun is cracked enough to dodge. A second later, Orhan calls down the lightning and fries the other two members instantly. With the small fry deleted, only Shaun is left standing. This girl is a straight-up hacker, blocking Orhan's hits and spamming high-level blizzard spells with zero incantation time. Her cooldown management is insane. Orhan has to dash back to avoid becoming a popsicle. While he's trying to math out her build, she flicks her wrist and summons a lightning strike right on his head, again with zero voice lines. Orhan clutches the save with his shield but is totally shook because nobody in the meta casts high-tier magic without a chant. Shaun gives Orhan his flowers for being tough and tries to recruit him to Amantheth, but he declines the invite immediately because he doesn't vibe with griefers. Shaun drops a smirk, saying Orhan reminds her of a childhood bestie who logged out years ago. She claims she doesn't actually want to delete anyone, but since the original was defeated and the clone fell into enemy hands, she's out of options. Orhan is completely lagging at this point, having zero clues what she's yapping about. He tells her if the situation is that cooked, she should just surrender and save everyone the trouble. This triggers Shaun, who screams that try-hard adventurers like Orhan are actually throwing the game for the whole world by speedrunning dungeons without a permit. Shaun's mental breakdown has Orhan stunned for a few seconds. She officially loses all patience and decides to end the lobby by spamming a massive chain reaction explosion spell. For the first time ever, Orhan has to face a bullet hell of fire and debris, and he's looking completely overwhelmed. Shaun is 100% verified confident that he's been sent to the main menu because nobody survives that kind of AoE damage without a barrier. However, once the smoke depawns, the crew sees that Orhan is still looking fine as hell. Turns out, he used transformation magic to turn his sword into a riot shield for a clutch save. While Shaun is shook and trying to re-render the situation, Orhan morphs his weapon into a whip chain and hardlocks her in place. This magic flex is so unreal that Shaun can't believe her eyes. The only person she ever knew who could mod magic like that was her childhood bestie. She starts connecting the dots and realizes Orhan is actually the day one friend she thought was permanently banned from life. At the same time, Orhan looks at her and starts getting flashbacks, feeling like he should know her lore, but his brain is currently in airplane mode. Once she realizes Orhan is alive and kicking, Shaun understands she's been gaslit and manipulated by those two old men for years, and she's salty as hell about it. But our boy Orhan is still clueless about her yapping and doesn't remember the receipts of who she is. He hits her with the ultimate curve, asking, "Wait, do I know you?" Seeing his memory loss is that bad? Shaun decides not to spill the tea just yet. Now that she knows her day one is still in the game, Shaun has zero interest in catching hands anymore, so she asks Orhan for a hall pass to bounce. Orhan isn't hyped about letting her go, but his mana bar is flashing red, so he's forced to retract the chain whip. Shaun drops some cryptic parting words, promising that everything will make sense later. Just as the Amantheth griefers start to respawn their consciousness, Selma and the rest of the squad enter the chat for a clutch save. Orhan is low-key spiraling because if another team fight breaks out, his squad is cooked, but Shaun tells him to chill, so already logging out. Regardless of the drama, she's still locked in on a promise she made to him years ago. She hopes their next lobby isn't a 1v1 on opposite sides of the map, then uses a teleport ultimate to yeet her entire assassin squad off the map. Orhan is stunned into silence for a good 5 seconds trying to process the lore, but he's just glad the team is okay. Well, except for that unlucky observer who's currently spectating from the afterlife. Cut to a different scene out in the snowy mountains. Shaun is standing on a cliff literally screaming to vent her hype because Orhan is officially back from the dead. But she's also down bad with the feels because he's now an adventurer, her natural enemy in this server. The fact that Orhan has zero receipts of their past together is a major oof for her heart, but she knows it's not his skill issue. She blames the villains who griefed her home and separated them. She makes a blood oath to make them pay for this toxic drama, even if it's the last thing she does. Meanwhile, Oliver is still sweating the grind out in the fields, desperate to outstat Orhan. The batty filly adds fuel to the fire, leaking the news that Orhan soloed a black dragon and is being glazed by the public as a literal hero. Oliver is salty as hell and jealous, but he's staying low-key honorable. He refuses to use dirty hacks and is determined to legit win against Orhan to prove he's the real main character. Meanwhile, the guild boss is sitting in his office, pressed because Orhan is way too cracked even taking down a buff dragon. He's trolling the fact that the guy who used to be a legend is now a manual laborer working for him without knowing the true tea. He decides to let Orhan keep grinding while he stays clueless about the massive red flags popping out behind the scenes. The next morning, Orhan has a squad meeting with the kids. After the trauma dump from yesterday, he hopes they realize their power levels are still mid at best. The kids clapped back, saying he was OP enough to save everyone, but Orhan hit them with a reality check yesterday was not a W. If Shaun hadn't intentionally thrown the match and retreated, the entire squad would have been permanently banned from the server. Orhan's final take was that even if he could pick off a few enemies, he had zero chance against a coordinated pro team. Because of that wake-up call, Orhan is locking in to max out his stats and get even more cracked, swearing he'll never be powerless in a clutch moment again. Season 1 wraps up with that and of tea still left unspilled regarding Orhan's past. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next anime drop. Catch you day ones later, bye bye.